The case of Nicole Lobby. Nicole Lobby, 29 years old, lives with her husband Chris and has a large family in Oregon, USA. Nicole was a beautiful woman, loving wife, amazing mother, and a friend. She was not afraid to share her faith or her opinion with anyone. Her goal was to make sure that she left this world a better place. When Nicole met Chris, she already had an older daughter. Chris also had 2 daughters, and after they got married, they had a son. Nicole is known for being adventurous, brave, and always looking forward. She overcame a rare cancer and then became very passionate about fitness. Nicole's goal is to become a fitness trainer. Nicole recently started a new job, and no one thought she would be in danger at work. At about 5 p.m. on August 19, 2014, Portland Emergency Services received a call from a man reporting that a woman had been stabbed in the chest. The victim was still alive but had difficulty breathing. So the witness requested that an ambulance be sent to Timber Creek Apartments as soon as possible. Police quickly arrived and spoke with the man who called 911, who gave more details about the incident. He said he and his wife were walking down the stairs of their apartment building to the parking lot when they heard screaming. He turned to his right and saw a woman running toward them, screaming, "He stabbed me, he stabbed me." She told the couple she didn't know the attacker, but he was wearing camouflage pants and a black hoodie. The manager of Timber Creek Apartments identified the victim as Nicole Lobby, 29, a coworker. Nicole was a leasing consultant and had been working there for several weeks. On August 19th, during her work hours, she drove a trolley around the complex delivering letters asking for lease renewals. Along with each letter, Nicole gave each resident a balloon tied to a bag of popcorn. When she was done, she marked each apartment on a map in the trolley. Based on Nicole's notes and the map, detectives determined that the attack may have occurred on a specific stairwell in Timber Creek at the time residents heard Nicole screaming. The attacker may have been waiting for her under this stairwell. There was also a trail of blood from the stairwell and flyers scattered at the bottom of the stairs. During the Washington County Sheriff's Office investigation, several witnesses reported seeing a suspicious young man wearing a black hoodie and camouflage pants near Timber Creek at the time of the attack. Combining the reports and the timing of the sightings, detectives determined the suspect's route through Timber Creek. More than 20 officers were involved in this intensive investigation, assisted by K-9 dogs. The Washington County Search and Rescue Team searched the woods along Cedar Mill Creek, a stream that runs through the Timber Creek residence. During the search, they found several items that were sent to a lab for analysis. Detectives did not disclose the exact findings but said they were investigating every possibility. Investigators are trying to figure out what caused the attack, which took place in broad daylight at an apartment complex with more than 1,000 residents. They have contacted Nicole's husband, Chris Lobby, and informed him of the incident. The police took several steps to identify the attacker. It was not a robbery, and the attacker did not attempt to remove her clothing. This suggested that the motive for the murder might have been a personal dispute. This theory led detectives to her husband, Chris. Chris cooperated with the police and answered questions about his 4-year marriage to Nicole. Investigations revealed that he was at daycare picking up his son at the time of the attack. Therefore, Chris could not have been the attacker. Meanwhile, while interviewing residents at Timber Creek Apartments, the police found 2 more witnesses who saw a man wearing a black hoodie and orange pants. They saw this man, who had similar features to the suspect, running across the street without looking back. Around the same time the attack on Nicole took place, a hooded man was seen running toward the houses across from Timber Creek Apartments. Detectives, working with witnesses, drew up a sketch of the suspect and quickly circulated it throughout the city, even appearing on television news. The city urged anyone who recognized the familiar facial features to report the incident. Detectives also worked with informants to find clues about the killer. The sketch led to several leads. A man said his son knew a man who matched the sketch. His name was Taylor, and he had recently threatened others with a knife. Police found Taylor and brought him in for questioning. Taylor said strange things and seemed to have mental problems. When asked about Nicole, he did not hesitate to admit that he had killed her. However, Taylor's testimony was inconsistent, as he only mentioned information that had already been in the newspaper and gave irrelevant details. As a result, the police eliminated him as a suspect. After the sketch of the suspect appeared in the newspaper, the police received a tip about a man named Nick who had a criminal history. Nick looked similar to the suspect in the sketch. However, he had never done anything similar to what happened to Nicole. He had run-ins with the law before, but he had never physically harmed anyone. The police interviewed Nick and found his behavior disturbing. When asked about Nicole and the crime, he denied any involvement and asked for a lawyer. The police then obtained a search warrant for Nick's home. They found a black hoodie and orange pants, but the hoodie did not match the witness description because it had a bright white logo on the front. Nick's clothes were sent for analysis, but no evidence was found linking him to the crime. Nick's phone records also showed that he was not near the scene of the attack. As a result, the police eliminated Nick as a suspect, and the case went cold. Nicole's family is going through a very difficult time. In an interview with reporters, Chris Lobby shared that he can't stop thinking about what happened to Nicole. He said, "The hard thing is that there are so many unanswered questions. I keep thinking about what happened, different scenarios, and there are no answers to any of them." The police were concerned that the perpetrator might strike again, and their worries became a reality. 3 weeks after Nicole's death, on September 13, 2014, the Eugene Police Department received an alarming call. Eugene is a city about 100 miles from Portland. On that day, a resident was attacked while leaving a bar near Autzen Stadium. Heather Miller, 39, had gone to a bar near the stadium to watch the game. Around 8 p.m., when the game ended, Heather decided to go home. The streets were almost deserted. As she left the bar, she tried to call a taxi but realized her phone was dead. So she decided to walk closer to the stadium to catch one more easily. As she walked along the sidewalk, she noticed someone following her. As she crossed the street and turned around, she saw the man behind her was still following her. She walked faster but was suddenly hit in the back of the head, knocking her unconscious. When she woke up, she found herself face to face with her attacker, who had pulled down her pants in an attempt to sexually assault her. Heather tried to reason with her attacker. She said she had a daughter and begged to see her again, but he continued to beat her. Heather described that every time she spoke, she was punched in the face. Eventually, Heather realized that the only way to survive was to pretend to be dead. She closed her eyes and remained silent. When the attacker thought he had achieved his goal, he ran away. Despite the brutal beating, Heather found the strength to stand up and go out into the street. A minute later, a car stopped and the driver called 911. An ambulance arrived and rushed her to the hospital. Heather regained consciousness and spoke to a detective who arrived shortly afterward. At this time, neither of them knew that the attacker had been arrested at the police station. There was a park near the scene of the attack. A police officer on duty that night saw a man running, stopped him, and saw that his hands and shoes were bloody. The police arrested him and called a patrol car to take him to the station. Jamie Tinoco, 17, was young but had been noticed by the police many times. At the time of his arrest, he was on probation for illegal possession. Jamie had been using drugs since he was 12, and his parents had no control over him. Jamie had dropped out of high school since his freshman year and was arrested for driving without a license the day before the attack on Heather, but was released shortly after. During questioning, Jamie confessed to attacking Heather. The man was completely calm and nonchalant, believing he had done nothing wrong. His actions led the Eugene Police Department to suspect that Heather was not his first victim. Police released his photo, hoping that other women affected by him would come forward. Soon after, detectives investigating Nicole Lobby's death saw a photo of Jamie released by Eugene Police. They believed Jamie matched the sketch of the suspect they had. Further investigation revealed that Jamie lived with his parents in Portland and that their apartment was across the street from Timber Creek, which further fueled their suspicions that he was involved in Nicole Lobby's death. Detectives questioned Jamie about Nicole's case, hoping that he would admit to assaulting her, as he had confessed to attacking Heather Miller. However, Jamie insisted that he had nothing to do with Nicole's death and refused to answer questions. Police needed to find evidence to link him to Nicole Lobby's death. As mentioned earlier, Jamie lived across the street from his parents at Timber Creek Apartments. As a result, the police obtained a search warrant for his parents' apartment. They found a black hoodie and orange pants in Jamie's room and sent them to a lab for analysis. However, the lab results were disappointing, with no trace of Nicole's DNA on any of Jamie's belongings, and the investigation seemed to hit a dead end. While there is no evidence to prove that Jamie killed Nicole, there is enough evidence to link him to the attack on Heather Miller. He did not deny his actions and seemed proud of being a young thug. At his trial in connection with the attack on Heather Miller, he smiled and said he had no remorse for his actions. Jamie had broken away from a group of delinquent teens on a trip supervised by the Washington County Juvenile Department. He followed Heather, attacked her from behind, and dragged her into the bushes near Atson Stadium. Heather said she still has nightmares and flashbacks and chipped her front teeth after the attack. She has had to find a new job. The injuries she suffered in the attack, including a broken nose, required reconstructive surgery to recover. "There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about what happened," she said in Lane County District Court. "I pray that Jamie will never have the opportunity to do this to another person and impact their life the way he impacted mine." Heather Miller held hands with two family members as she sat with more than a dozen supporters before reading her statement aloud. Jamie grinned in court as the victim recounted the horrifying details of the attack she endured. When the judge asked why Jamie was smiling, he replied that he did not know. The judge called Jamie's lack of remorse appalling and labeled him a danger to the community, then imposed the maximum sentence. Heather, comforted by friends and family after the hearing, said his behavior was disrespectful and unrepentant, and the judge's sentence was fully deserved. A courageous mother of two, Heather pleaded with the judge that Jamie would never have the opportunity to harm another person. She did not want him to think he had won and brought her down. So she kept her composure from the start. Although the defense tried to portray Jamie as a young man who had been affected by substance abuse for years, the judge noted that his behavior in court clearly reflected character issues. Jamie's lawyer asked the judge to sentence his client to 8 years and 4 months in prison, arguing that Jamie was remorseful for what he had done. However, Jamie did not apologize when the judge allowed him to speak. He refused to make any statements. Judge Deborah Vogt sentenced Jamie to 14 years and 2 months in prison, explaining that his lack of remorse justified the harsh sentence. "The community needs to be protected from a dangerous man like this," she said. "As much as people want me to see him as a boy, I can't." When Jamie becomes eligible for release, he will be in his early 30s and will have to register as a sex offender for the rest of his life. As for Heather, her family said she is looking forward to starting a new job and being able to move on with her life. Meanwhile, investigators decided to take advantage of Jamie's ego to get him to confess. They questioned him about Nicole Lobby's death. The detectives told him that he would get more respect in prison if the other inmates knew that he was not only the coward who attacked one woman from behind, but also the one who killed another. After a few minutes of silence, Jamie began talking about Nicole, saying that he didn't mean to kill her. He wanted to feel the sensation of stabbing someone, but he didn't mean to kill Nicole, just hurt her. He said that when he was walking from his apartment to Timber Creek, he saw Nicole park her car and bring a balloon to her second-floor apartment. As Nicole climbed the stairs, he hid behind the car, then ran up the stairs and stabbed Nicole when she turned around. Jamie said he chose Nicole because he thought she would be an easy target. When asked if he would try to force Nicole to have sex, like he did with Heather Miller, he casually replied, "Oh, I've thought about it. I would." Jamie said he didn't do it because Nicole screamed when she stabbed him, so he ran away during the reenactment. Jamie showed investigators how he escaped the scene. Chris Lobby said he was shocked to learn that his wife's killer was only 17. "I have a 13-year-old daughter," he said. "It's unbelievable and hard to understand that someone 4 years older than her could do this." The trial began in 2015. Despite confessing under questioning, Jamie has pleaded not guilty in court. His attorney argued that there was no DNA evidence linking him to the scene. "I'm just asking for leniency for a 17-year-old boy with a serious mental illness who has the potential to change with treatment," defense attorney Robert Axford said. The defense's only witness was a psychologist who evaluated Jamie and determined he had symptoms of schizophrenia. However, a psychologist at Oregon State Hospital determined that Jamie had a personality disorder, not schizophrenia. His video confession and reenactment convinced the jury of Jamie's guilt. During his reenactment, he described details that only Nicole Lobby's attacker would know. During the sentencing phase, the jury had two options: life in prison without parole or life in prison with the possibility of parole in 30 years. The jury determined that there were no mitigating circumstances sufficient to impose a life sentence with the possibility of parole in 30 years. As a result, in 2017, Jamie Tinoco was found guilty on all counts. Jamie, then 20, stood in the Washington County courtroom between his two attorneys when Court of Appeals Judge Kirsten Thompson asked him if he had anything to say before she formally sentenced him to life in prison without parole. He put his hands down in front of his waistband, his mouth twitching slightly. "I beg for forgiveness," Jamie said before sitting down. Chris Lobby, Nicole's husband, said Jamie's family came to see his family after the sentencing to express their condolences and apologize. But that's not the end of the story. In 2021, the Oregon Court of Appeals overturned Jamie's 2017 conviction. Juvenile law has changed since Tinoco was tried on a Measure 11 charge. Under the new reform, offenders between the ages of 15 and 17 are no longer automatically sent to adult court. The new law requires prosecutors to hold a hearing to decide whether juveniles charged with serious crimes should be transferred to adult court. If the case is retried, Jamie's attorneys could ask for a lighter sentence. The decision to overturn the conviction came as a shock to Nicole Lobby's family, who were not expecting it. Nicole's father, Rich Jones, said they will have to go through another emotional ordeal. Jamie remains in prison, but this is not the end of Nicole Lobby's case. The case of Danielle Jennings. Danielle Jennings was born on September 16, 1978, in Columbia, South Carolina, United States. She grew up in Stockton, Georgia, with her mother and stepfather. Known for her cheerful and outgoing personality, Danielle faced adulthood early. At the age of 16, she became pregnant but was determined to be a good mother. Danielle's relationship with Carl, the father of her child, ended in divorce. In 1996, she gave birth to her son Tristan at the age of 17, and despite the difficulties ahead, Danielle was determined to provide the best life for herself and her son. Then she met Luis Payano, a man who would become Tristan's father. Danielle and Luis had known each other since they were teenagers, initially as friends, but their relationship developed into love. Luis took care of Danielle and Tristan, and for a time, it seemed like all their problems had been solved. The couple moved in together, and Danielle secured an office job at a landscaping company, a position she was proud to have obtained. In December 1998, Luis proposed to Danielle, and she happily accepted. Her life was on the right track, with a loving son, a fiancé, and promising career prospects. On March 15, 1999, Luis returned home from work to find his fiancée, 20-year-old Danielle Jennings, lying lifeless on the bed in their Ashley Lakes apartment in Norcross, Georgia. Their young son, Tristan, was at daycare at the time. Luis immediately realized Danielle was dead due to her skin color and called 911. When the police arrived, Luis was waiting for them and reported what he had found. He explained that upon entering the apartment, he saw Danielle lying face down on the bed, and when he turned her over, he discovered she was dead. The police naturally suspected Luis, and they took him in for questioning while a team of officers thoroughly examined the crime scene. Danielle was found lying on her back on the bed, fully clothed, with a sock around her neck. This suggested that the perpetrator intended to kill her, leaving no chance for survival. The fact that the stocking was tied at the back indicated that the perpetrator was behind Danielle when they strangled her. The crime scene showed signs of disarray, with the bed messed up and a dresser drawer open. It's possible that the perpetrator took the stocking from Danielle's drawer. The contents of her purse had been dumped and rummaged through, leading police to consider the possibility of a robbery gone wrong. However, several valuable items, including cameras and jewelry, were left untouched. This led police to speculate that the perpetrator may have intended to steal something but encountered Danielle and decided to kill her to avoid being identified as a witness. The lack of forced entry at the front door and the locked sliding glass door in the backyard raised suspicions that the crime scene might have been staged. Despite searching the surrounding area, police found no evidence. After investigating the crime scene, police discovered that Danielle may have let the killer into her home voluntarily or that the killer had a key to the apartment. As a result, the prime suspect became Danielle's fiancé, Luis Payano. When police started questioning Luis, he displayed intense emotions. The police were aware that romantic relationships can sometimes escalate into anger, leading to devastating consequences. To begin the interrogation, they asked Luis about his whereabouts on the day of Danielle's death. Luis claimed he spent the entire day at work. He last saw Danielle when they both left their apartment at 6:45 a.m., but she returned briefly to retrieve something. According to Luis, Danielle was anxious about an important meeting with management at work and seemed slightly distracted. He also mentioned that Danielle called him at 11:30 a.m. to invite him to lunch, but he declined due to his heavy workload. Luis tried to contact Danielle later that day but couldn't reach her. Concerned, he called her co-workers, who told him she had gone out for lunch but failed to return to work. Luis then contacted their home, where he spoke to someone named Lise, who also hadn't heard from Danielle. Luis left work to check on Danielle at their home in the Ashley Lakes apartments. When he arrived, he found something unsettling. The front door was unlocked. Upon entering, he saw a jar on the floor. During the investigation into Danielle's death, police questioned Luis about his relationship with her. They asked if the couple had frequent arguments or domestic problems. Luis insisted that their relationship was good and that they loved each other very much. Clearly feeling confused, he became frustrated with the questioning, believing that the police were wasting their time by focusing on him. He insisted that they should find the real culprit, who was still at large. Police ALS.O spoke to Danielle's friends and family, all of whom sided with Luis. Luis and Danielle were madly in love and were planning their wedding. However, their happiness did not last long. During the investigation into Danielle's case, Luis's co-workers confirmed that he had been at work all day, providing him with a solid alibi and eliminating him as a suspect. During the interrogation, Louise said that Danielle's coworker Jeff was showing her too much attention and she was unhappy about it. The police immediately went to Danielle's workplace and spoke to her boss. Danielle's boss confirmed to the police that Danielle had complained about an employee named Jeff. Jeff was a middle-aged man who was a manager at the company. Danielle complained to her boss that Jeff was constantly hanging around her, interfering with her work, and behaving inappropriately. There was a significant age difference between Danielle and Jeff. He was 40 years old and she was 20. Jeff invited Danielle to lunch and Danielle told him that she had a fiancé. She refused to go to lunch with Jeff. The company where Danielle worked took her complaints seriously. On the day of her murder, she had a meeting regarding a complaint she had filed with management against Jeff. She was very nervous about it. She feared that her career might be in jeopardy because she was a new employee and Jeff was her manager. Her co-workers mentioned that Danielle had gone home for lunch after this meeting but had not returned. That gave the police a time frame for when Danielle's attack occurred. The investigation revealed Jeff's involvement, especially when it was discovered that he was absent from the office at the time of the crime and did not return until later in the evening. Police focused on Jeff as a suspect, possibly following Danielle home and attacking her when she opened the door, which would explain the lack of signs of entry. Jeff was called in for questioning and asked to describe his relationship with Danielle. He admitted that he invited her to lunch but denied his involvement in her death. Jeff didn't deny liking her, however. He claimed he had not behaved inappropriately towards Danielle and was surprised when she filed a complaint against him. The investigators asked him if Danielle's complaint was a reason for wanting to harm her. His first reaction to this question was anger. He was adamant that he wasn't the one who took her life. Jeff claimed that he couldn't have been the one who attacked Danielle because he had an alibi. According to him, he was with another colleague, and they were driving around the city solving some work issues. They had been together all day, so he couldn't be the one who took Danielle's life. Jeff told investigators the name of the coworker whom he claimed he was with at the time of the crime. The detectives met with this man, and he confirmed Jeff's words, thus they excluded another person from the list of suspects. The next day, investigators received the autopsy report and examined it in the hope of getting some clues that would help them track down the perpetrator. The cause of Danielle's death was asphyxia. It seemed evident that Danielle's attack had taken her by surprise. The investigators concluded that someone had come up to her from behind and pulled the stocking tight until she lost consciousness. After that, the perpetrator tied the stocking in a knot so Danielle could not regain consciousness. There were no defensive injuries on her body. In fact, there were no injuries at all except for the ligature mark on her neck. Perhaps Danielle didn't even see the face of the one who attacked her. The police found no evidence at the crime scene that could help identify the perpetrator. No shoe prints, no DNA, no fingerprints, no hair. There was no evidence to send to the laboratory for analysis. Since the police had no new suspects, they returned to the version that what happened was a robbery that went wrong. They asked Louise to go through the apartment with them again. He carefully examined everything and said that nothing was missing from the apartment. All the things seemed to be in their usual places. However, a few days later, Lou called the police and said he could not find Danielle's wedding ring. He also drew the attention of investigators to another strange detail. The stocking that someone strangled Danielle with did not belong to her. According to Louise, she didn't wear stockings at all. It meant that whoever had done it had brought the stocking with them. Lacking any evidence, the investigators decided to look into Danielle's past. Perhaps what happened to her was connected with her past. They asked her friends about her previous relationships, in particular, her relationship with Carl, the father of her son Tristan. Her best friend told the police about Danielle's ex-boyfriend Eddie. She started dating him when she was already pregnant. Eddie was a violent guy, and as their relationship IP progressed, he became more domineering and tried to control all aspects of her life. It got to the point where he forbade her to see her friends and family. The relationship with Eddie deteriorated even more after Danielle gave birth to her son. Soon after, Eddie started using illegal substances, and Danielle decided it was time to end this relationship. She moved out and tried to start a new life, but Eddie had other plans. He did not accept rejection and behaved unpredictably. As a result, Danielle had to seek a restraining order against him. He violated it several times, called Danielle, parked near her house, and once even showed up at her work. Danielle's family told investigators that Eddie had called her several times in recent months. He told her to meet with him, but she always hung up. Eddie was the perfect suspect, so detectives tracked him down and brought him in for questioning. The man was hostile, and he wasn't eager to go to the police station. However, Eddie had an alibi. He said that Eddie was towing cars out of state at the time of the murder and that Eddie's boss, along with service logs and other receipts, could back him up. When the police confirmed his alibi, they released Eddie. 3 days after Danielle died, Danielle's neighbor, Kirk, called the police and told them about something that had happened to Kirk the week before the murder. Ms. Kirk said that recently in the apartment complex, residents often encounter a maintenance worker. The maintenance worker said he came to do a repair order. However, Ms. Kirk said that she felt very uncomfortable the whole time he was there because he kept staring at Kirk, as if he was more concerned with her than completing the repair order. The same thing happened to another woman. The maintenance worker insisted that he was there to change a light bulb, when the landlord said there were no bulbs to change. He mumbled and staggered, "Maybe I have the wrong apartment," then backed up and walked away. Police investigations revealed that the complex had several maintenance workers, but the one who matched the descriptions of both women was Calvin Oliver, 42. According to records, Calvin had only started working at the complex in September 1998. At the time of Danielle's murder, 10 residents had reported cash, checks, and other valuables, including jewelry, computers, and guns, missing from their apartments without evidence of forced entry. Some even suggested that someone on the maintenance staff was responsible. Calvin Oliver was brought in for questioning by the police, who initially asked him about a series of burglaries at the Ashley Lakes apartments. Calvin denied any involvement in the burglaries. When asked about Danielle Jennings, he said he had heard about what happened to her but did not know her. The only thing he confessed was that he had worked in her apartment. The police were about to release Calvin for lack of concrete evidence when they ran a final check of Calvin's database. The results were horrifying. They discovered that Calvin had an outstanding warrant in another jurisdiction for failing to appear in court on a theft charge related to the theft of a personal check. According to Georgia Department of Correction records, Calvin had a long-standing adult criminal record dating back to 1974. His convictions included multiple residential burglaries, armed robbery, robbery by force, and at least one count of forcibly pressuring a woman into intimate contact at knife point. As a result, Calvin spent the majority of his life incarcerated. Given his extensive criminal history, it's surprising he was able to get a job at Ashley Lakes Apartments. The police took Calvin Oliver into custody, which allowed them to thoroughly investigate his potential involvement in Danielle Jennings's death. As part of their ongoing inquiry into a string of thefts at Ashley Lakes' apartments, the police obtained a search warrant for Oliver's apartment. During the search, they discovered stolen items from other residents, and the police discovered Danielle's wedding ring in his home. This discovery directly linked Oliver to Danielle's death. When the police questioned him about the wedding ring, Calvin claimed that he had stolen it about 3 weeks before Danielle's death. However, this claim was proven false. Calvin became a suspect and refused to cooperate with police after being caught lying. At trial, the prosecution argued that Calvin killed Danielle after she caught him breaking into her home. After a 5-day trial that ended on October 13, 2000, the jury returned a guilty verdict on all counts. As a result, Calvin Oliver received a life sentence for the murder of Danielle Jennings and an additional 20 years for the burglary. A subsequent investigation revealed that Ashley Lake Apartments management knew about Calvin's history of run-ins with the law and his lengthy criminal record. Despite this knowledge, they failed to conduct thorough background checks and failed to warn other residents when a series of burglaries occurred. When these facts came to light, Danielle's family filed a lawsuit against Ashley Lake Apartments that they argued that the evidence demonstrates a reckless disregard for the safety of others. After a trial, a jury returned a verdict of more than $13 million for Danielle's wrongful death. The complex's key policy was also flawed, prosecutors said. Employees had access to house keys, and the lockboxes containing keys to the complex's 240 apartments were often left unsecured. Calvin Oliver is now serving a life sentence in prison. The case of Rebecca Payne. Rebecca Payne was born on April 19, 1986, in New Milford, Connecticut, to Virginia and Nicholas Payne. She was their only child. Rebecca attended New Milford High School, graduating in 2004. During her high school years, she was an active athlete. After high school, Rebecca enrolled in Northeastern University in Boston, where she pursued a degree in athletic training. This 5-year program focused on the care and prevention of athletic injuries. In her 4th year, Rebecca held leadership positions, including a spot on the Dean's Council and serving as president of the Athletic Training Club. She played a key role in organizing the university's vision for the Future Athletic Training Leadership Forum and was also involved with the Episcopal Lutheran Center. Rebecca was known for her friendly and approachable nature. She had a large circle of friends and was always willing to lend a helping hand. At 6:30 a.m. on May 20, 2008, Boston police received a call from the manager of the Parker Hill apartment complex. The man was in a panic. He told the police that he had seen a door ajar in a 3rd-floor apartment. A 22-year-old student, Rebecca Payne, lived in the apartment. When he knocked on the door and called her name, no one answered him. And he decided to go inside. There, he immediately saw dark red spots and stripes on the floor that led him to one of the rooms. He found Rebecca lying on the floor, with no signs of life and her belongings scattered. When police arrived at the crime scene, they observed that the front door showed no signs of forced entry, suggesting that Rebecca may have known her attacker and may have let herself in willingly. Her 3rd-floor apartment had 2 bedrooms, and Rebecca's body was found face down on the floor in the bedroom. A trail of blood led from the living room to the bedroom, suggesting that the attack occurred in the living room, as there were traces of shell casings in that room. Forensic examinations showed that Rebecca had been shot 5 times. Blood stains in the apartment suggested that she had been conscious for some time, attempting to crawl to the bedroom before losing strength. Her valuables were still there. The state of disarray in her apartment was suspicious, leading police to believe that the perpetrator may have deliberately created the mess to distract them. Additionally, the mess may have been caused by Rebecca's struggle for life. When they searched the apartment, police observed that both the balcony door and the front door were open. Signs in the 2nd bedroom suggested that someone else had been living there. Identifying this person became a top priority for the police, as they were likely Rebecca's killer. After speaking with the apartment manager, police discovered that Rebecca lived with another student in her apartment, prompting police to begin searching for the student. At the same time, police interviewed residents of Parker Hill Apartments, some of whom reported hearing a woman scream and gunshots between 3 and 4 a.m. Unfortunately, no one reported the incident to the police. Rebecca Payne's tragic death left her parents reeling, not only from the loss of their daughter, but also from the appalling indifference of their neighbors. Despite hearing Rebecca's screams and gunshots, no one called for help. Rebecca's parents described her as a vibrant and compassionate young woman. She had a big heart and was known for putting others before herself, always looking to help those in need. In the aftermath of her death, police interviewed residents of the apartment complex where Rebecca lived. One man, who lived on the first floor, reported seeing a black SUV approach the building at night. However, due to the darkness, he was unable to see the car's license plates or identify who got out of the vehicle. The apartment building where the crime took place had both internal and external surveillance cameras. However, when police asked the building manager for the footage, they discovered that the cameras only allowed for real-time viewing. The outdated equipment required a video cassette to be inserted into a VCR and manually recorded, but no one had done so. Given this information, along with the fact that the manager was the one who found Rebecca's body, police began to suspect him of the crime. As a resident of the building, he had constant access to Rebecca's apartment and was aware that the surveillance cameras were not being monitored. The suspicion against the manager grew when a background check revealed his past run-ins with the law, specifically related to prohibited substances. Furthermore, an officer noticed dark red stains on the front door of the manager's apartment, which were swabbed and sent for examination. The manager was taken to the police station for questioning, where he denied any involvement in Rebecca's death, claiming he spent the entire night in his apartment with his wife. The police also spoke with his wife to verify his alibi. The woman's husband was initially a suspect, but his wife provided an alibi for his whereabouts during the night of the crime. Laboratory results showed that the dark red stains on his apartment door were just paint, leading the police to release him due to lack of evidence. Police investigating the case reviewed video and photo materials from the scene and focused on a public transportation card found near the crime scene. This card, used to pay for public transport in the Boston area, stores data on its usage, including the location and time of each use. Traffic police provided police with surveillance camera footage of the card being used. After reviewing the recordings, police determined that the card belonged to Rebecca and was used by her on the night she went missing. The footage showed Rebecca walking home, appearing calm and alone, with no signs of anyone following her. Unfortunately, this discovery did not lead to any new leads on the identity of the offender. The police obtained another video from a surveillance camera located outside the hospital building, near the Parker Hill Apartments. This video captured a black SUV driving by at the time of Rebecca's attack. Although the video was poor quality, preventing the officers from seeing the license plates, it did appear to match the description given by the witness, and the detectives believed it was a Ford vehicle. Meanwhile, detectives interviewed Rebecca's roommate at the police station. The roommate expressed shock at Rebecca's death and stated that she had been living with her parents while studying for an exam. This alibi was verified by her parents, clearing her of suspicion. However, the conversation was still fruitful, as she provided potentially valuable information that could aid the investigation. According to Rebecca's roommate, Matt, Rebecca's boyfriend, had access to their apartment. To determine if Matt had a motive to harm Rebecca, police reached out to him by phone. Matt explained that he had moved to New York State to live with his parents around the time of the attack. He claimed to be depressed over Rebecca's death. Matt stated that he had been staying with his parents, and they confirmed his alibi. Police obtained a record of Matt's cell phone activity, revealing a conversation with Rebecca on the night of the attack, around midnight, a few hours before her death. However, the cell tower that received the signal from Matt's phone was located near his parents' house in New York State. To verify Matt's alibi, police conducted an experiment and concluded that it would have been impossible for him to drive from his parents' house to Boston in 3 or 4 hours, making it unlikely that he committed the crime. As a result, Matt was ruled out as a suspect. Rebecca's family and friends traveled to her home state of Connecticut to say goodbye, but the police investigation into Rebecca's death stalled. Despite their efforts, no new evidence was found, No witnesses came forward, and no DNA samples were collected. The case appeared to have reached a dead end. Years went by. In 2012, a breakthrough occurred. Anthony White was arrested by the Boston police for trafficking illegal substances and faced a lengthy prison sentence. In an attempt to reduce his sentence, Anthony offered to provide police with information about the night Rebecca Payne died. Recognizing this as a potential opportunity to solve the long-standing case, the police accepted Anthony's offer. Anthony declared that, on May 20th, 2008, Anthony received a call from Cornell Smith, an acquaintance involved in the same illicit activities as him. Cornell requested a meeting, and Anthony agreed. Cornell arrived with their mutual friend Michael Balba, who drove a black SUV. The three of them went to the Parker Hill Apartments, where Michael parked in a spot with a clear view of the building. When Cornell spotted Rebecca in a third-floor window, he identified her. They waited until the lights in her apartment went out, assuming she had fallen asleep. Cornell then climbed from the first-floor balcony to the third-floor balcony, where he found the door to the apartment open. However, upon entering, he found Rebecca awake and lying on the couch in the living room. She began screaming when she saw him, and a brief struggle ensued. Cornell shot her 5 times before fleeing the apartment through the front door and escaping with Anthony and Michael in the SUV. Police questioned the credibility of Anthony's testimony, suspecting that he had fabricated the story based on news reports in order to get a reduced sentence. Police did not understand Cornell's motives, as Rebecca had no connection to him. However, according to Anthony, Rebecca's death was a case of mistaken identity. 2 sisters who lived on the first floor of Parker Hill Apartments looked very similar to Rebecca. The sisters were Cornell's rivals in the illegal drug trade. In retaliation, Cornell targeted Parker Hill Apartments, but he was not sure which floor or apartment the sisters lived in. When he saw Rebecca at the window, Cornell mistook her for one of his enemy sisters. Police looked into Cornell Smith's past and found that in February 2008, he was arrested for dealing illegal substances. Shortly before Rebecca's death, Cornell was released on bail. According to Anthony White's statement in 2012, Cornell wanted revenge against the sisters. However, when Anthony White came forward, Cornell Smith was already serving a 12-year sentence in prison for another conviction. With Anthony's new testimony, Cornell was then also charged in Rebecca's murder. Cornell denied his involvement, though. Before the case could go to trial, the key witness, Anthony White, died in prison. There was no longer any evidence to prove Cornell's involvement in the murder of Rebecca Payne. Since Anthony White was dead, the police needed new testimony from Michael Balba, who was with Anthony and Cornell on the night of the murder, in order to convict Cornell Smith. Michael was arrested and taken to the police station, but without evidence, he denied involvement and requested a lawyer. As a result, hopes of solving the case seemed lost. In a final attempt to find the connection between Cornell and Rebecca's death, the police looked into Cornell's case files in connection with a separate case of drug trafficking. During the search, the police came across letters written by Cornell Smith to the judge. These letters revealed Cornell's arrogant attitude towards others, some of which seemed meaningless. However, one letter contained a crucial piece of evidence that linked Cornell to Rebecca's death. It remains unclear why these letters had not been scrutinized earlier, despite being addressed to the judge. The discovery of this key evidence ultimately helped police build a case against Cornell. In a letter written out of anger, Cornell referenced an altercation that had taken place in downtown Boston, leading to the unfortunate death of Rebecca Payne at the hands of Cornell. This letter confirmed that Cornell was in Rebecca's apartment at the time of the incident. The trial took place in 2015. Jeffrey Karp, a defense attorney with more than 20 years of experience, was the first attorney to represent Cornell. However, Jeffrey withdrew from the case after an incident. Cornell suddenly stood up and struck Jeffrey Karp in the head with his handcuffed hand, causing chaos in the Suffolk County Superior Court in Massachusetts. Jeffrey Karp then opted not to prosecute, instead allowing the judge to appoint a new attorney for Cornell. Cornell Smith took a plea deal and pleaded guilty to taking the life of Rebecca Payne as part of the deal. He received a prison sentence of 18 to 20 years from the judge. To honor Rebecca's memory, her hometown renamed the local tennis court after her. A garden and a National Athletic Trainers Association scholarship fund have also been established in her name. According to Rebecca's father, Nicholas Payne, these tributes were created with one main goal in mind: we don't want her to be forgotten. The case of Lauren Heike. Lauren Heike was born on November 20th, 1993, in Seattle, Washington, to a well-off family. Her father, Jeff, owned a plumbing manufacturing business, and her mother, Lana, worked in real estate. Lauren was close to her older brother, Ryan. She attended Central Kitsap High School in Silverdale, Washington. After graduating, Lauren moved to Phoenix and enrolled at the Gary Manuel Lida Institute to study cosmetology and skin care. Lauren took great care of herself and had a good understanding of cosmetics. Lauren started her career at 18 years old and achieved significant success. She initially spent 5 years, from 2015 onwards, working as a customer support representative. She then became a leading manager at Benefit, a renowned cosmetics company. Next, she worked as a cosmetologist at a beauty salon for 9 months. In October 2020, Lauren got a job as a manager at an aesthetic medicine center. Additionally, she had aspirations to pursue a career in real estate, following in her mother's footsteps. At the time of the tragedy, Lauren was working full-time as an instructor at a golf club. Lauren was a confident and responsible individual who thrived in multiple areas, including the beauty industry, sports, and real estate. She made her physical health a top priority and led a healthy, active lifestyle. With a strong support system of friends and family, which allowed her to make the most of her leisure time by doing things she loved, such as traveling, going on hikes, and spending time with others. One of her favorite pastimes was walking alone, immersed in music and nature, savoring the fresh air, silence, and tranquility. Her preferred route was a secluded path in the northern part of Phoenix, close to her apartment. Lauren's parents worried about her walking alone in empty areas, but she felt sure she was safe. Lauren began each day with a consistent routine, waking up, drinking coffee, chatting with loved ones and friends, and embarking on her daily walk. She believes these things help her start her day on a positive note. However, Lauren has no idea that her gullible and carefree nature will put her in danger. On April 28, 2023, Lauren started her morning routine as usual. She had coffee, chatted with family and friends on the phone, and went for a walk in a quiet area near her apartment in northern Phoenix. The scenic trail took around 15 to 30 minutes to walk one way. Lauren left her apartment at around 10:30 a.m. Surveillance cameras last captured her walking calmly on the trail at 10:52 a.m., wearing a pink sports top, black leggings, and sneakers, with only her phone and keys on her. After that, she was not seen again. Lauren was expected at work at 11:30 a.m. but failed to show up, which was unusual for someone so responsible. Her colleagues tried calling her, but her phone was turned off. This worried Lauren's friends, who shared messages on social media and called each other to find information about Lauren's location. However, no one had any news, and Lauren had not been seen after leaving her apartment that morning. At about 1 p.m., Lauren's worried parents went to her apartment because they couldn't get in touch with her. They thought maybe she wasn't feeling well and that's why she didn't go to work. But Lauren wasn't there either. All her belongings were still in place, the doors were locked, and nothing suggested there had been a break-in or a struggle. It looked like she had gone out for a walk and just hadn't come back. After that, Lauren's relatives immediately filed a missing person report with the police. The authorities reacted swiftly and initiated a search, but unfortunately, they did not get any results. The park where Lauren went for a walk was almost deserted. If someone had been passing by when the attack occurred, the tragedy might have been prevented. However, that was not the case. Lauren was last seen walking alone towards the park, and then she disappeared, no longer responding to calls. Throughout the day, the police and volunteers thoroughly searched the surrounding area, the park, and looked for potential witnesses. They meticulously combed every corner and every bush but found nothing. Lauren's loved ones held on to the hope that she might have simply wandered off, got delayed, or visited friends in another part of the city. Lauren's relatives kept calling and texting her, but still didn't know where she was. As the hours passed, their hopes dwindled and their fear for Lauren's life grew. Her parents, brother, and friends were beside themselves with worry. The following morning, April 29th, was like a terrible nightmare. At around 11 o'clock, the worst happened. A woman walking her dog stumbled upon Lauren's body. She recognized Lauren because she often walked her dog on that route and had seen Lauren before. The dog sensed something was wrong, and the woman saw Lauren's bloody body. She immediately called the police. Police arrived instantly at the scene to a horrific sight. Lauren's body was found 3 meters off the trail, concealed in a thicket with numerous stab wounds. She lay face up with outstretched arms, her clothes torn, and blood was everywhere. Experts began working immediately, with the forensic medical examiner determining that Lauren died on April 28th at approximately 11 a.m. due to blood loss from deep knife wounds. A total of 15 stab wounds were found on Lauren's body, likely inflicted with a pocket knife. The wound in her back area was fatal. The nature of the wounds indicated that the attack and murder lasted for some time, as they were in different parts of her body, varying in depth and shape. The injuries on Lauren's hands showed she had resisted, with deep cuts on both sides of her hands from trying to deflect the sharp knife. Police realized Lauren fought to the end, but her attacker was aggressive and strong. The attack was unexpected, and scratches on her back, shoulders, and torn clothing indicated the suspect attacked from behind, knocking her down and stabbing her with a knife. He then turned her over and continued to strike. At the crime scene, investigators found a clear footprint from a size 42 to 43 sneaker, likely belonging to the attacker. The area showed signs of a struggle, with Lauren attempting to crawl away and hide in nearby bushes. However, she was unable to escape, and bloodstains were found stretching several meters from the scene, ending near her body. It appeared that Lauren fought for her life and called for help, but unfortunately, she was alone in the deserted park at that early hour with no one nearby to assist her. Near the body, a barbed wire fence was discovered, which Lauren seemed to have desperately tried to climb over. Torn clothing and blood were found on the wire, suggesting that her attempt to overcome the fence resulted in the numerous scratches and abrasions on her body. Lauren's phone and house keys were found nearby, having fallen from her pockets during the struggle. Her phone was broken, with the last calls made on the evening of April 27th, indicating that no one had heard from her for over a day. Further examination of the area revealed a bloody pocket knife among the branches a few meters from the crime scene, providing another crucial piece of evidence. Experts quickly identified the object as the likely murder weapon. Further analysis of the blade and handle uncovered fingerprints and DNA traces from an unidentified male. Investigators also collected hair and skin cells from the killer at the crime scene. Lauren's body, along with all physical evidence, was promptly sent for forensic examination. Meanwhile, investigators reviewed the surveillance camera footage from the park. They found that one camera captured Lauren entering the park at 10:52, walking alone and listening to music on her headphones, without anything seeming out of the ordinary. However, just 1 minute later, a tall, thin man in dark clothing appeared on the recording, quickly passing by the camera as if attempting to conceal his face. Despite the man's efforts to hide, experts were able to make out that he was a young African-American male wearing a cap. Notably, his height, build, skin color, and clothing matched the description of the individual whose traces were discovered at the crime scene. Another camera, positioned at the park exit, recorded the same man rushing out from around the corner at 10:59, looking around frantically. He then tried to climb over the fence but got his clothes caught, ultimately jumping over and losing his cap in the process. The investigation gained its first lead from records showing the suspect disappearing in an unknown direction. Although the perpetrator's identity couldn't be immediately established, the police now had an accurate description and distinguishing features to work with. Notably, the unknown man appeared in the park around the same time Lauren was murdered, according to preliminary findings. The cameras captured footage of the killer before and after the crime. A detailed analysis of the footage revealed more information. The suspect moved with purpose, glancing around as if fearful of being seen. He appeared in the park about 30 to 40 seconds after Lauren did, suggesting he was following her. After committing the crime, the perpetrator fled the scene in the opposite direction of the park entrance, scaling a fence to escape quickly. This behavior supports the theory that the murder was premeditated and possibly not his first offense. The killer acted swiftly and boldly, attempting to avoid leaving evidence behind. However, in their haste, they made mistakes that allowed them to be partially captured on camera. Despite being shown footage from the cameras, Lauren's parents and friends were unable to identify the man in the video. The tragedy left everyone shocked and deeply saddened. Lauren's loved ones don't understand why someone could so cruelly take the life-kind and energetic girl. Lauren had no enemies, was not involved in any conflicts, and did not owe anyone money. Additionally, she did not own anything that was worth a significant amount. Her lifestyle is extremely healthy. As a result, the possibilities of revenge or robbery were quickly ruled out. A week after the murder, a press conference was held where police officers shared the evidence they had gathered and appealed to the public for help in identifying the suspect. Lauren's father, clearly distraught, pleaded with anyone who had information to come forward, help and assist law enforcement. In response, Lauren's relatives offered a substantial reward for any information that could help identify the killer. The case sent shockwaves throughout the city, prompting thousands of people to take action by sharing information on social media, organizing search parties, and volunteering. Meanwhile, investigators continued to analyze physical evidence. Forensic experts carefully examined DNA, fingerprints, and other biological evidence in a laboratory. Eventually, they got a break in the case. The suspect's genetic profile matched a record in the police database, which identified Zion William Teasley, a 22-year-old African-American with a history of crime. Detectives promptly began to investigate Teasley's background. Their inquiry revealed that Teasley was raised in a troubled home. His parents struggled with addiction. Teasley had a criminal record from a young age, with offenses including theft, public disorder, and intimidation. In 2020, he was convicted of committing several armed robberies. As a result, Teasley spent almost a year incarcerated, but his sentence was reduced due to positive behavior, allowing him to be released early. Teasley's most recent arrest occurred in January 2023 for a knife attack on a bystander, but the charges were dropped when the victim withdrew their statement, resulting in Teasley receiving a suspended sentence. At the time of Lauren's murder, the suspect was under police supervision, requiring him to regularly report to the precinct. His last check-in occurred on April 27th, the day before the tragic incident in the park. Upon learning this, detectives started devising a plan to apprehend Teasley. placing him under 24-hour surveillance. It was discovered that Teasley was unemployed and spent most of his time at home, occasionally visiting the store or meeting with suspicious individuals. Having obtained an arrest warrant, police visited Teasley's apartment, breaking down the door to gain entry. However, they found no one inside. The search uncovered a bucket of chlorine, gloves, and rags, indicating Teasley's likely intention to eliminate evidence. Teasley's room contained a packed suitcase and a new passport in a different name, along with bus tickets to Canada, suggesting a plan to escape the country. The investigation led detectives to believe Teasley was aware of the search and aimed to evade justice. A massive search operation was launched. Information about Teasley was sent to all states, and border agents were instructed to apprehend the suspect. Surveillance systems have been enhanced at railway stations, airports, and highways. By tracking calls from Teasley's phone and analyzing cell tower signals, detectives sought to pinpoint his location. Concurrently, they collected more evidence, including accounts from witnesses who spotted Teasley following Lauren the day before the murder. Another witness stated that they saw him in the same park 2 days prior to the tragic incident. A thorough investigation into Teasley's past revealed a disturbing pattern of violent behavior towards women. Just a month prior to Lauren's murder, he was detained for harassing a woman at a nightclub. Furthermore, a former girlfriend had previously filed a complaint against him for physical abuse, although the case was ultimately dropped due to insufficient evidence. It is clear that Teasley was an extremely unstable and aggressive man with a deep hatred of women, whom he considered inferior. Teasley's social media posts were discovered, where he used derogatory language towards women. Photographs were found featuring knives that bore a striking resemblance to the murder weapon at the scene. Authorities suggested that Lauren may have been a random victim of Teasley's violent tendencies. Lauren's family were shocked and couldn't understand why someone would be so heartless and cruel. Their daughter had simply gone for a walk and was brutally murdered for no reason. Lauren's father made a heartfelt plea to the public, begging them not to seek revenge themselves. He wants people to let the police handle the situation and punish the perpetrators through the law, instead of using mob violence. After a 3-day search, Teasley was apprehended in an abandoned garage on the city's outskirts. During the arrest, he resisted and injured a police officer. During questioning, Teasley was uncooperative, claiming he had committed no crime and had never seen Lauren before. He later denied being in the park that day, but fell silent when shown surveillance footage, and he requested a lawyer. The prosecutor promptly charged Teasley with intentional murder and kidnapping, citing substantial evidence, surveillance videos, Lauren's belongings found in a garage, a knife, DNA, and fingerprints from the crime scene. The court ordered Teasley to be held without bail. Teasley's trial began on June 5, 2023, and was one of the most high-profile cases in state history, drawing widespread national attention. Journalists and members of the public who were concerned about the issue assembled in front of the courthouse. Everyone in the courtroom was to catch a glimpse of the person responsible for the horrific murder. Teasley, the defendant, was led in wearing handcuffs and an orange prison robe, his expression eerily indifferent. In stark contrast, Lauren's family was overcome with heartache. Her mother sobbed uncontrollably, while her father glared at Teasley with anger and hatred. The prosecutor gave a powerful and emotional speech, portraying Teasley as a ruthless killer who posed a significant threat to society. He stressed how brutally the crime was committed and the overwhelming evidence against Teasley. Prosecutors described Teasley as a psychopath who enjoyed inflicting pain on women, driven by a deep-seated hatred for them. Conversely, Teasley's defense attorney sought to prove his client's innocence. He challenged the evidence, arguing that it was possible another individual was responsible for Lauren's death. The defense urged the jury to remain impartial, to focus solely on the facts and not be swayed by public opinion or emotions. Teasley is currently charged with first-degree murder. In December 2023, the Maricopa County Prosecutor's Office requested the death penalty, the most severe punishment allowed by Arizona law for such a serious crime. The Phoenix Police Department has completed their investigation, and the suspect will face prosecution. However, Teasley maintains his innocence despite the charges. He remains in custody without bail. The trial is expected to take place in October 2025 and will be one of the most high-profile cases in Arizona history. Lauren's tragic death shocked the nation and devastated her loved ones. The case of Katie Sepich. Katie, a 22-year-old woman, was known for her outgoing personality, intelligence, and vibrancy. Born and raised in Carlsbad, New Mexico, she was the eldest of 3 siblings. Katie is Jean's special daughter, admired for her intelligence and charming personality that attracts everyone. Katie graduated from New Mexico State University with a business degree and had plans to start her MBA program in the fall. To support herself, she worked as a waitress at a local Mexican restaurant. During her time at the university, Katie met Joe Bischoff and they quickly formed a close bond. Over time, their friendship blossomed into romance. Katie shared her happiness with her mother, Jean, expressing her hopes of building a life with Joe. Months later, Katie's dream became a possibility when Joe proposed to her with a diamond ring. However, after Katie and Joe graduated in the summer of 2003, they faced challenges in their relationship. Katie decided to stay at the university to continue her studies, while Joe returned to his parents' home in Gallup, New Mexico, a small city about 350 miles away from Las Cruces. This distance put it difficult on their relationship. Despite this, Katie and Joe made an effort to stay in touch and meet whenever possible. On Labor Day weekend in 2003, Joe visited Las Cruces and spent time with Katie. However, their weekend together turned into a tragedy. On Saturday, August 30th, 2003, Katie had fun with Joe and their friends, going from bar to bar and eventually ending up at a local house party. After the party, Katie vanished. The following day, August 31st, 2003, Katie's mother, Jean, received a phone call. This changed her life forever. Recounting that day, Jean described it as follows. She had been preparing for a Labor Day weekend cookout with her family and friends when the phone rang at 2:15 afternoon, bringing news that would shatter her world. The caller asked, "Have you talked to Katie today?" The phone call was from Katie's roommate, Veronica, who had been searching for her and had already contacted Katie's friends and local hospitals without finding any sign of her. Jean was informed by Veronica that Katie had left the party by herself the night before. Veronica and Joe had fallen asleep at the party location, assuming Katie had returned home. However, when they woke up in the morning, Katie was nowhere to be found. Her family immediately contacted the police to report her disappearance. Around the same time, a passerby discovered a half-naked woman's body near a desert landfill. Although there was no identification nearby, police officers arriving at the scene concluded that the body had likely been there for less than 24 hours. It was clear to them that the victim's death was no accident. The victim, estimated to be between 20 and 25 years old, had been stripped of clothing from the waist down. Examination of the body revealed self-defense wounds on her arms, indicating she had put up a fight and scratched her attacker. The police found skin particles under her fingernails, providing them with the perpetrator's DNA. Strangulation marks were visible on her neck, initially suggesting it as the cause of death. The investigators concluded that the young woman did not die at the remote desert landfill where her body was found, as there were no signs of a struggle near the scene. Instead, it appears her body was moved there in an attempt to delay the search. A disturbing detect on the victim's body revealed burn marks on her arms and back, suggesting that the perpetrator had tried to dispose of the body or destroy evidence by setting it on fire. The police quickly made a connection between Katie's disappearance and the discovery of a young woman's body. Katie's father was called to the morgue to identify the body. Katie's mother, Jean, said that the young woman's body was their daughter's. Jean struggled to put into words the immense pain and agony they were enduring. As if they were falling into a deep, dark abyss with no way out, leaving them with no sense of tomorrow or any remaining joy. Katie's father shared that when they lifted the sheet, revealing his daughter's bruised and disfigured face, he was deeply saddened. Katie's father shared that when they lifted the sheet, revealing his daughter's bruised and disfigured face, he was deeply saddened. The residents of once peaceful Los Cruces were shaken by the horrific incident. The police were determined to find the perpetrator as soon as possible, aware that there was no guarantee the person wouldn't commit another crime. The investigation into Katie's case began with a thorough examination of her final hours. The police aimed to piece together her last moments, where she was, who she was with, what she was doing, and if she had any conflicts or enemies. Since the party was about a mile from Katie's home, investigating whether she made it back safely was a priority. To start, the investigators spoke with Veronica, Katie's roommate, and Joe. The detectives found it suspicious that these two stayed at the party while Katie left alone in the middle of the night. However, Joe was uncooperative, stating that Katie had departed, leaving her purse, phone, and keys behind. The investigation team then focused on retracing Katie's route home, going door to door to interview residents, hoping for any leads. Unfortunately, no one saw or heard anything that could help the investigation. Investigations revealed a crucial detect. Katie likely returned to her house but failed to enter it. Notably, she had left her keys behind. Upon searching the house, the investigator found Katie's shoes beside her bedroom window. It appears she attempted to enter through the window but was ambushed. Footprints in the gravel nearby supported this theory. A violent struggle ensued, but sadly, Katie's attacker overpowered her. Further investigation led the authorities to believe that the perpetrator disposed of Katie's body at a desert landfill, attempting to conceal evidence by setting it on fire. The central question remained, was the attacker a stranger or someone Katie trusted? With around 40 party attendees, there was a strong possibility the killer was an acquaintance. Could the perpetrator have been Katie's boyfriend, Joe? This led investigators to interview partygoers, unearthing a critical detail Joe did not mention. Several witnesses reported that Katie saw Joe kissing another girl, which sparked a heated argument between the couple. In her state of anger, Katie hastily left the party alone, forgetting her purse. When questioned by police, Joe neglected to disclose this crucial information. He also did not inform Katie's parents about the incident, despite their curiosity about why Katie had left the party by herself. The investigators questioned Joe again about his whereabouts on the night of Katie's murder. They had discovered that he and Katie had a fight earlier that evening after she saw him kissing another girl. Joe acknowledged the argument and explained that he followed Katie home but did not enter her house. He claimed he saw her bedroom light was off and assumed she was asleep, so he returned to the party. However, the new information sparked suspicion because it indicated Joe was not at the party when the attack occurred, and none of the partygoers could confirm when he returned. During further interviews with party attendees, investigators found another peculiar detail. When he returned to the party, Joe called Katie. Then Joe heard the phone ring, and he realized that she had left her phone at the party. Despite this, Joe continued to phone her until morning. Was he trying to create an alibi or pretend to be concerned about Katie's well-being? Investigators asked Joe to clarify his actions, but he refused to cooperate with them any. Katie loved Joe very much, but he didn't even come to her funeral, which aroused even greater suspicion. Investigators decided to test his DNA. They had collected DNA evidence from Katie's body. mostly under her fingernails, where they found human skin cells. The sample's DNA all belonged to one person. The police needed to compare his DNA to the DNA found on Katie's body. But there were problems with that. Joe was out of town, and his lawyer informed the investigators that Joe refused to provide a DNA sample. The police suspected that Joe was involved in Katie's death, given his suspicious behavior. To confirm that, they needed to find a legitimate way to obtain Joe DNA. However, this took time, and in the meantime, they searched other possible explanations. They investigated similar cases to determine if Katie was the victim of a serial offender. The DNA found on her body was matched against a national database, but no matches were found. The investigators decided to revisit the party where Katie was last seen. They identified the male attendees and asked for their DNA samples, which they all willingly provided. However, none of their DNA matched the samples found on Katie's body, leading the investigators to focus on Joe again. Notably, Joe was the only person who had refused to provide a DNA sample, but the investigators found an alternative method to obtain Joe's DNA sample. Katie and Joe spent time in her bedroom before attending the party, engaging in intimate contact. The police visited Katie's house and collected the bed sheet, hoping to find Joe's DNA. Their efforts were successful, and the lab discovered a sample of male DNA on the sheet. However, the DNA did not match the sample found on Katie's body, indicating that Joe was not the suspect. This discovery raised further questions about Joe's behavior, as he had refused to cooperate with the police despite not being involved in the attack on his girlfriend. The police sent the test results to Joe's lawyer, informing them that he had been cleared as a suspect. Joe agreed to talk to the police again and provided a DNA sample. The results supported the initial findings. Joe was not involved in Katie's crime. When questioned about his initial reluctance to cooperate, Joe explained that he and Katie had been intimate before the party, and he was worried that his DNA would be found on her body. The mystery surrounding Joe's behavior on the night of Katie's death remained unsolved for the police and Katie's family. After Joe was cleared as a suspect, the police explored alternative theories. Party attendees informed investigators that Katie was wearing rings, including the one given by Joe, but none were found on her body when it was discovered. The police believed that the killer removed the rings from Katie's fingers. They searched local pawn shops but did not find Katie's rings. The discovery of specific tire tracks near where Katie's body was found provided another new lead. Experts identified the tire brand and model, and the manufacturer informed the police that these tires were most commonly used on pickup trucks. Unfortunately, this information did not help identify the culprit, and the case hit a dead end. A year after Katie's attack, a similar crime occurred in Wisconsin. A girl in Green Bay was assaulted, set on fire, and left for dead. However, the victim somehow managed to survive by pretending to be dead. Once her attackers left, she put out the flames and sought help at a nearby residence. The survivor described her attackers to the police as two Hispanic men. The police created sketches based on her description and released them to the public. A local farmer recognized the men in the sketches as his workers, Gregorio Morales and Juan. One of them had relatives in Los Cruces, and he often visited them. Both men were arrested. As a result, the police were able to apprehend both suspects. Initially, investigators thought they had identified Katie's attacker, but the DNA test results contradicted this conclusion. The sample's DNA did not match the DNA found on Katie's body. Although Gregorio Morales and Juan were later convicted of assaulting the girl in Green Bay, they were not linked to Katie's case. Gregorio Morales and Juan were sentenced to 50 and 70 years in prison, respectively. The only leads the police had to go on were the tire tracks from the crime scene and the DNA samples of the perpetrator. Katie's family was hopeful that these DNA samples would allow the police to identify the person who took their daughter's life. Unfortunately, there were complications with the DNA evidence. At that time, police were not mandated to collect DNA samples from individuals when they were arrested. Katie's mother was shocked and devastated by the loss of her daughter to a violent man. The family's main concern is to find out the identity of the perpetrator, understand the motive behind this terrible crime, and most importantly, that the killer is held accountable and no longer poses a threat to others. The lead detective gives an update on the case, saying that aside from DNA evidence, they currently lack concrete other leads to investigate further. Katie had fought hard for her life, which resulted in her killer's blood and skin being found under her fingernails. This had allowed investigators to create a DNA profile. Detectives uploaded the DNA into CODIS, the National Forensic Database, and then checked it against the offender database on a weekly basis to see if there was a match. Although they had the killer's identity through the DNA profile, the police needed to find the matching individual in their database to make an identification. Katie's family felt hopeful, they knowing the police would eventually match the DNA to a suspect, bringing them closer to justice for their daughter's tragic death. Katie's murder case saw a major breakthrough 3.5 years later. On December 18, 2006, the lab found a DNA sample that matched the DNA found on Katie's body. The perpetrator was identified as 26 years old Gabriel Avila, a married man of 2. He has a very long previous criminal record and had been released from prison shortly before Katie's death. On November 13, 2003, Gabriel Avila was apprehended by authorities after breaking into an apartment, armed with a knife. Fortunately, 2 young women inside the apartment managed to evade his attack by quickly locking themselves in the bathroom and dialing 911 for emergency assistance. He was convicted of aggravated burglary in March 2004, but released on bond. A flaw in the system caused a significant delay, and it wasn't until 3.5 years later that investigators were able to link him to Katie's death. Gabriel Avila managed to evade police for nearly a year. Then, he being apprehended in November 2004, based on a tip. He received a 9-year prison sentence. While in prison, Gabriel Avila provided a DNA sample, but it took 2 more years to be tested. Once the results showed a partial match with the DNA from Katie's crime scene, investigators quickly jumped into action. They found the truck Gabriel Avila used to dispose of Katie's body and discovered a ring belonging to her in the center console. In 2006, after finding a ring belonging to Katie in Gabriel Avila truck, detectives investigating Katie's case visited his in prison. Gabriel Avila confessed to the crime, explaining that while his wife was away, he was in the area to buy illicit substances. He claimed that he approached Katie and offered her a ride, which she declined. Later that night, Gabriel Avila encountered Katie again in front of her house. He stopped and offered her assistance, and that Katie told him she was locked out without her purse. Gabriel Avila attempted to help her, but he then attacked and began undressing Katie. What followed was a violent assault. After the assault, Gabriel Avila panicked and decided to strangle Katie out of fear that she would identify him. Despite Katie putting up a brief struggle, Gabriel Avila restrained her, unable to let go, ultimately leading to her death. Gabriel Avila claimed he put Katie in his pickup truck and drove her to a desert landfill, where he left her body on the ground. He attempted to burn the body, thinking it would eliminate evidence. But this effort was unsuccessful. A new DNA sample from Gabriel Avila matched the DNA found at the scene. When authorities found DNA on Katie's body in 2003, her parents were optimistic that it would help quickly find a suspect. However, at the time, there was a significant gap in the law. In New Mexico and most states, it was illegal to take DNA when someone was arrested. DNA could only be collected from individuals who had been convicted of a crime and sent to prison. This meant that the DNA on Katie's body couldn't initially be matched. The trial of Gabriel Avila, who was accused of the crime, began in 2017. Gabriel Avila apologized to Katie's family during the trial. His lawyer asked the judge to consider showing leniency, emphasizing that Gabriel Avila was genuinely remorseful for his actions. In contrast, District Attorney Susana Martinez countered that it took Gabriel Avila more than 3 years to confess to the crimes, and he only did so after detectives presented him with DNA evidence. At the sentencing, David, Katie's father, pleaded with the judge to hand down a severe punishment. He stressed that because Katie would never have another opportunity in life, it was only fair that her killer should not be given a chance to be free again. In May 2007, Gabriel Avila was found guilty and sentenced to 69 years in prison. After serving 30 years, he will be eligible for parole around 2043. The case of Cassie Farrington. Cassie was born on December 22, 1990, in Virginia. She was the second of 4 children to Chuck and Darlene Brooks. Cassie excelled academically and was an active student, she becoming a member of the National Honor Society and participating in sports. Her initial goal was to pursue a career in medicine. However, when Cassie turned 16, her life drastically changed. She became pregnant, which led her to change her future goals and plans. Several major changes in Cassie's life occurred in the next month. Cassie graduated from high school, gave birth to a baby, married Bradley Farrington, and moved out of her parents' house, all within a brief period, just 1 month. Several years later, she had another child. But over time, her family relationship began to deteriorate. Ultimately, the marriage ended in divorce. Despite this, she persevered, raising her 2 young children in Silver City, a small town with a population of about 10,000. At 22 years old, she worked as a nurse at the local hospital and rented a place from a coworker. As she turned 23, Cassie entered into a new relationship with a man named David Berry. He bonded quickly with her children, and she felt grateful for the way things were going good. Rather than rushing into things, they focused on building a life as a family unit. Cassie confided in her loved ones and co-workers that David had brought happiness to both her and her children, and she was hopeful that this new relationship would bring her the peace and happiness she had been missing after her previous failed marriage. On March 24, 2014, Cassie phoned her parents after finishing her night shift at the Silver City Hospital. They chatted for a few minutes, during which she shared her plan to drive home, pick up her children, and take them to school. Afterward, she intended to return home and rest for a couple of hours before picking her children up from school later that day. School staff called Cassie's parents when they couldn't reach her. Her children had finished their classes, but Cassie hadn't shown up to pick them up. Cassie's mother tried calling her, but there was no answer. Thinking Cassie might have overslept after a night shift, her mother asked Cheryl, her landlord, to check if Cassie was home and if she was okay. Cheryl went to the house and knocked on the door, but no one answered. She then walked around the house and peered through the back door window, noticing water pouring from the bathroom into the kitchen. She knocked harder on the door and shouted Cassie's name, but still got no response. With her own key, Cheryl unlocked the door and entered the house. The sound of running water was louder and more distinct. As she walked across the wet floor towards the bathroom, Cheryl called out Cassie's name, her voice shaking slightly. Then she saw Cassie. Cheryl, a coworker and friend of Cassie's, discovered her lifeless body in the overflowing bathtub. She was lying face down, wearing a house robe, as water continued to pour out. Despite Cheryl's first aid skills, she realized that Cassie had been dead for a few hours, as rigor mortis had already set in. This made CPR impossible. Cheryl immediately called 911 to report the incident. She then broke the devastating news to Cassie's parents over the phone, informing them of their daughter's passing. As Cheryl waited for the paramedics and police to arrive, she took a moment to inspect the house. She noticed that the second bathroom, located elsewhere in the house, also had an open faucet with running water. However, the hub there had an overflow protection, so the excess water wasn't running onto the floor but going down the drain. Cheryl also observed that the towel rack in the bathroom had been pulled off the wall and was lying on the floor. Upon receiving the news, Chuck and Darlene, Cassie's parents, were devastated. They stopped everything they were doing and traveled from Arizona to Silver City. Within a few hours, they arrived at the house, where their daughter's body had been found. The police were already on the scene, investigating the circumstances surrounding Cassie's death. The officers observed that there was no sign of forced entry into the house, as all the locks were still in place, the windows were closed, and the glass was intact. Additionally, valuables in the house were still intact, so the possibility of robbery was unlikely. The local sheriff questioned Chuck and Darlene, asking if Cassie had any intention of committing suicide and if she had any reason for doing so. However, Chuck and Darlene firmly dismissed this idea and declared that there was no way Cassie would do such a thing. The police chief repeatedly told Cassie's parents that she had likely taken her own life, as if he was trying to convince them of that fact. However, Cassie's parents found the police investigation to be rushed and confusing. Normally, the scene of the case is thoroughly examined and investigated, a process that can take several days. In Cassie's case, the police left the scene just a few hours after her body was found, and they informed Cheryl that she was allowed to enter and use the house. This worries Cassie's parents, and they decide to investigate the house themselves. After finding water still in the bathtub, they emptied it and discovered black streaks on the sides of the tub that resembled the marks left by rubber-soled shoes. They also found Cassie's glasses, hairband, and a coat hanger in various places on the floor. Cassie's parents were even more suspicious when the police didn't take the time to search the house for fingerprints. They suspected that the authorities might be trying to close the case quickly without thoroughly investigating it. It wasn't until they contacted the district attorney's office that the police appeared to put in more effort. However, they were still unable to close the case due to the findings of the medical examiner. The autopsy report showed that Cassie had several bruises on her body, particularly around her neck. The examiner concluded that her death was a homicide. However, the investigation had difficulty by the property owner having cleaned up and made some repairs after the incident. This meant that the original crime scene had been disturbed, which could impact the investigation's progress. Cassie's parents were met with silence from the police as the months went by. The police did investigate David Berry, a man Cassie had been seeing before her death, but he was quickly ruled out as a suspect due to a solid alibi. However, as time passed, Cassie's parents grew increasingly frustrated with the local police, feeling they were not doing enough to solve the case. Their concerns led Chuck and Darlene to request a meeting with the chief district attorney to voice their dissatisfaction with the handling of the investigation, specifically with Detective Jose Sanchez. After reviewing the case file, the district attorney agreed with the parents, finding that Jose had made numerous errors. As a result, Jose was removed from the case and a more experienced detective took over. From the start, Cassie's family and friends suspected her ex-husband, Bradley Farrington, was responsible for her death. At the time of Cassie's passing, Cassie and Bradley was entangled in a heated custody battle over their children. And Bradley stood to gain the most from Cassie's death, because he will win custody of the child. Bradley Farrington is a former Silver City police officer who had just retired a few months before Cassie's death, and his good relationship with investigators kept him from being considered a suspect. However, Bradley had a clear motive for the crime and possessed the necessary knowledge to destroy evidence. He was well aware of police procedures and how to cover his tracks. For example, the bath water will wash away any remaining DNA evidence on the body, as well as erase shoe prints on the floor. Given Cassie's familiarity with Bradley, it's likely that she would have opened the door for him. Unfortunately, due to the poor handling of the investigation by the local police, so any evidence linking Bradley and to the crime scene was lost and could not be restored. The only remaining way to hold Bradley accountable is through eyewitness testimony. Cassie had told her parents about their family being abused by Bradley, and that he often acted arrogant because he was a police officer. Cassie lived in constant fear, and Bradley's friends were police officers, and she couldn't turn to them for help. She had confided in co-workers about Bradley's threats, including the ominous threat that he would make her disappear without a trace. Tragically, her life was cut short, and she was found dead on March 24, 2014. 19 months later, on October 23, 2015, 28-year-old Bradley Farrington was arrested in connection with Cassie's death. Although Bradley was a suspect, the local police mishandled evidence, leaving none that directly linked him to the crime. As a result, the judge made a decision permitting previously recorded statements from Cassie to be used as testimony during the trial. During the trial, multiple witnesses testified, including Cassie's parents, friends, and co-workers, to whom she had confided about the abuse she endured at the hands of Bradley. Notable among the witnesses was Dr. Michael Hunter, a renowned forensic expert from San Francisco. With over 20 years of experience, Michael presented the jury with autopsy photographs and concluded that Cassie likely died from strangulation. Cassie had injuries to her neck, which supported that conclusion. After a warrant was issued for Bradley's arrest, Jose Sanchez, who initially handled the case, appeared in court. Jose claimed he had never considered Bradley Farrington a suspect because there was no reason to, and also testified that no fingerprints of Bradley were found at Cassie's home. The crime scene was unusually clean, Jose said. He believed the scene was cleaned after the crime was committed, which explains why no fingerprints were found. After 4.5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Bradley Farrington guilty on September 7, 2018. Bradley was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. He later filed an appeal with the New Mexico Supreme Court in 2020. Bradley appealed his conviction, claiming the trial court erred in allowing Cassie's co-workers, friends, and family members to testify in court. However, the state's highest court declared it had enough evidence to convict Bradley and rejected his appeal. The case of Autumn Taggart. In 2018, Autumn Taggart was a single mother living in Windsor, a city near the US-Canada border. She resided about a mile from the border that separates Michigan, USA, from Ontario, Canada, with her 9-year-old son, Gavin. On Saturday, June 9, 2018, Autumn, Gavin, and Chris Sherwin, Gavin's father and his Autumn's ex-husband, spent the afternoon together. Despite their breakup, Autumn and Chris had remained on friendly terms, prioritizing their co-parenting of Gavin to minimize the negative effects of their divorce. By the late afternoon, they went grocery shopping together. Afterward, which Chris drove Autumn and Gavin to the building where they lived on the 3rd floor. After saying goodbye, Chris returned home. Before bed, Gavin played video games with his mother. He had no idea later that night would turn into a terrifying nightmare. Later that night, while it was still dark, Gavin woke up to a strange noise. He opened his eyes to find an unfamiliar man standing next to his bed. The stranger instructed Gavin to close his eyes and go back to sleep. Then he left Gavin's room. Gavin heard his mother scream a minute later, and the sound sent a chill down his spine, filling him with a sense of dread. A few minutes passed, and eerie silence filled the air. His mother's screams had stopped, and he eventually drifted off to sleep. In the morning, Gavin got out of bed and rushed to his mom's room. The room was in disarray, with everything smashed and destroyed. His mom, Autumn, was lying motionless on the bed. At first, Gavin thought his mother was just sleeping, but the blood on her nose made it clear something was seriously wrong. As the devastating truth set in, that his mom had passed away, it shocked him. Gavin didn't want to believe it was true. Desperate to escape the pain, Gavin spent the morning playing video games and watching YouTube, trying to distract himself from the truth. However, as the day wore on, the emotions became too much to bear. In the afternoon, Gavin broke down in tears and knew he had to tell someone what had happened. Gathering his courage, Gavin went back to his mom's room, grabbed her phone, and texted his dad, Chris, on Messenger. With shaking hands, he typed out a message, telling his dad that Autumn wouldn't wake up. As soon as Chris received the message, he and his girlfriend rushed to Gavin's house. After parking, Chris exited his car and saw his son standing behind a sliding glass door on the third floor of the building. Since Chris didn't have an electronic key to enter, Gavin came downstairs to let him in. Chris then asked his son to stay with his girlfriend while he checked on Autumn, who was not waking up. Upon entering the apartment and bedroom, Chris found Autumn pale and bruised, with a bloody nose. He immediately called 911, and the police and ambulance responded to the scene. However, the paramedics declared Autumn dead due to the severity of her injuries and evidence of a struggle in the bedroom, ruling out the possibility of an accident. As investigators searched the apartment for evidence, a specialist interviewed Gavin to gather more information. The boy revealed that a stranger had entered their house and told him to go back to sleep. He reported hearing his mother's screams, which eventually stopped. Gavin also described the man he saw in his room, recalling that the man was of average height, white, and had disheveled hair, appearing as though he had just woken up. The boy's testimony described the suspect as skinny but not extremely so. A forensic examination after Autumn's death concluded she died from strangulation, with visible signs of a prior beating and genital injuries. Male DNA was also found on Autumn's body. The police investigated to answer three main questions. How did the perpetrator gain entry to the apartment? What was the motive behind the crime? And most crucially, the identity of the suspect. The police quickly ruled out the possibility that the killer was a tenant in the building. Since Gavin was familiar with all his neighbors, and the man he saw on the night of the crime was a stranger to him, this led them to look elsewhere for a suspect. To enter Autumn's apartment, the perpetrator needed more than just an electronic key to the building. However, there were no signs of forced entry on the door leading to the apartment. This initially led investigators to consider two possibilities. Autumn might have let the perpetrator in herself or forgotten to lock the door. Investigations later revealed that neither assumption was correct. The perpetrator had instead climbed to the third floor, starting from the balcony on the second floor, then accessing the apartment Autumn's as the door was open. Along with a DNA sample, the police found fingerprints at the scene and sought to identify the owner. It was 12 days after the body was discovered that the police released the victim's identity in hopes of gathering tips from the public. Anyone with potential information about the case was asked to contact detectives. On the night of the crime, a witness reported seeing a new black SUV, believed to be a Honda Pilot, in the parking lot next to the building. The SUV was present until around 6 a.m. Detectives suspected that the SUV's owner might be connected to Autumn's death, speculating that the perpetrator could have used the vehicle's roof as a stepping point to access the balcony. This building had distinctive protrusions at its corners that could have aided the perpetrator in climbing from the second floor to the third. During their investigation, police analyzed mobile phone activity around Autumn's residence on the night of the incident. The nighttime occurrence actually simplified their task, as most people were asleep, resulting in fewer active phone numbers in the area. Detectives discovered that one of the phone numbers belonged to Autumn's neighbor, Michelle. Although Michelle lived in the same building as Autumn, She said in an interview with police that she knew nothing. However, phone records showed that not only was Michelle on the phone while in her apartment, but she also traveled throughout the city multiple times. Additionally, she had turned off her phone around the time of the incident. While the phone's location indicated she was either in or near her apartment at the time, the exact location was difficult to pinpoint due to the inherent margin of error in location tracking. Detectives went back to question Michelle again, sensing she was hiding something about the case. At first, she denied knowing or hearing anything, but when police warned her that withholding information could make her an accomplice, she opened up. Michelle revealed that around 2 a.m., a man named Jitesh Bogle contacted her and her boyfriend, seeking to buy an illicit substance and was interested in hiring an escort girl. Michelle and her boyfriend agreed to meet Jitesh. They first stopped at an ATM, where Jitesh withdrew cash. Then, Jitesh purchased some of the substance from Michelle and her boyfriend, who were its dealers. However, Jitesh asked them to sell him more. Michelle instructed Jitesh to drive to the parking lot near her building. Once they arrived at the building, the three of them took illicit substances. Then, Michelle and her boyfriend decided to steal the remaining drugs and escape, leaving Jitesh behind. Remarkably, before running away, Michelle hid a bag of this addictive substance in her genital area. Although the details of how she did this are not provided, it is an important fact that will become relevant later. According to Michelle, she and her boyfriend grabbed the substance and some of Jitesh's cash and ran to the building's entrance. They then entered their apartment and locked themselves in, remaining quiet and keeping the lights off. Since Jitesh didn't have an electronic key, he was unable to enter the building. He also refrained from shouting or honking his car horn, fearing someone would alert the police. From their apartment window, Michelle and her boyfriend observed shoe marks on the roof of Jitesh's car. Jitesh drove away around 6 a.m. Investigators hypothesized that Jitesh had attempted to sneak into the building to retrieve the stolen substance and money. However, not knowing Michelle's apartment, he likely entered Autumn's apartment by mistake. The police now have the phone number and photo of suspect Jitesh. The image was captured from a bank security camera, where Jitesh had withdrawn cash to purchase the substance, and an ATM camera also took his picture. After verifying the phone number, investigators discovered that he was a 27-year-old Canadian citizen. He worked as a car development engineer in Warren, Michigan, and owned a black Honda Pilot SUV. Initially, Jitesh regularly commuted to Windsor, Canada, by crossing the river via bridge or tunnel. However, authorities tracked his movements, revealing he had left Canada on the morning of June 10th, the day Autumn died, and he has not returned to the country since. Following the release of information about a black SUV at Autumn's house, Jitesh sold his vehicle. The Canadian police collaborated with their American counterparts, learning that Jitesh planned to relocate from Michigan to Washington State, where his parents resided in Kent. After relinquishing his job and left Canada, Jitesh's actions raised suspicions. Nevertheless, the police required concrete evidence to make an arrest and facilitate his extradition to Canada. To investigate Autumn's death, the Windsor police sought assistance from the U.S. National Security Agency to track Jitesh's movements. A DNA sample found on Autumn's body likely belonged to the suspect, Jitesh, but a confirmed match was needed. Jitesh, attempting to evade detection, made several attempts to disguise himself. He shaved his beard and wore blue contact lenses to alter his appearance. However, Jitesh eventually made a mistake. During a visit to a bar in Warren, he left behind a used glass, which U.S. agents seized to obtain his DNA. The comparison of Jitesh's DNA to the DNA on Autumn's body took time, but the outcome was predictable. The test confirmed that the DNA on Autumn's body belonged to Jitesh. On August 17, 2018, over 2 months after Autumn's death, Jitesh was arrested at his parents' residence in Kent, Washington. The arrest caught Jitesh off guard, as he seemed to believe he had evaded detection. U.S. authorities have initiated the process of extraditing Jitesh to his home country. In the extradition documents, the prosecutor stated that Jitesh is a threat to society, at risk of fleeing, and unpredictable. Following this development, Canadian police charged Jitesh with the murder of Autumn Taggart. Due to national restrictions, it was not until November 2021 that Jitesh's trial took place. The trial was held across 3 separate courtrooms. In the main courtroom were the judge, the prosecutor, the jury, Jitesh, and Jitesh's defense team, all present for the proceedings. 2 additional courtrooms were equipped with large screens to broadcast the trial to Autumn's family members and other attendees. During the trial, Jitesh pleaded not guilty to the first-degree murder charge. He claimed that Autumn's death was accidental. According to Jitesh, on the night in question, Michelle and her boyfriend stole money and an illicit substance from him. The incident upset Jitesh, prompting him to exit his vehicle and pursue Michelle. However, due to his intoxication from consuming a substantial amount of alcohol and substances, Jitesh's memory of that night's incident is very limited. He recalled entering Autumn's apartment after climbing onto the balcony. However, he claimed he mistook her for Michelle, someone he believed had previously robbed him, on he finding Autumn asleep in her bed. Autumn woke up and screamed, but Jitesh immediately ordered her to be quiet. However, she continued to scream, and in an attempt to silence her, he covered her mouth with his hand. Unfortunately, this action caused Autumn to suffocate. Jitesh later claimed that he did not realize he had caused Autumn death until her screaming stopped. He attempted to revive her with CPR, but it was unsuccessful. Additionally, Jitesh did not recall how Autumn sustained genital injuries or how he left her apartment. His lawyers argued that the crime was not premeditated, citing Jitesh's extreme intoxication and inability to control his actions as the reason. According to them, his actions, including covering Autumn's mouth to silence her, were not a deliberate to take her life. According to defense attorney Peter Thorning, Jitesh was too drunk to fully understand the consequences of his actions. Peter emphasized that Jitesh's behavior could be attributed to his intoxication, and that the tragic outcome was unintentional, stating, "Sometimes terrible things happen without us intending the result, and that is what happened in this case." The lawyers pointed out a crucial aspect of the case. There was no evidence that Jitesh had engaged in intercourse with Autumn. This detail is significant, as it could impact Jitesh's sentence. Although Jitesh's DNA was found on Autumn's body, it was not seminal fluid. The lawyers argued that the appearance Jitesh's DNA could be the result of cross-contamination, where DNA is transferred from one surface to another. This could have occurred through the gloves of a forensic expert, for example. Jitesh's lawyers attempted to prove that John Lord, who worked in the forensic unit during the investigation, mishandled evidence and accidentally transferred their Jitesh's DNA to Autumn's body. John Lord's responsibilities included photographing the crime scene and collecting evidence that came into direct contact with Autumn. The defense lawyer, Peter Thorning, suggested that John Lord may have caused cross-contamination by rotating the body on the bed sheet, which was seized as evidence. This action could have resulted in the transfer of DNA or fluids between the body and the sheet. During cross-examination, John Lord testified. Peter Thorning asked John Lord if he had received proper training to work as a forensic identification expert. John Lord replied that he had taken precautions to prevent cross-contamination by changing gloves between handling each piece of evidence and using his camera to take photographs. John Lord searched Autumn's room for fluids such as urine, saliva, and semen. The reason for this search is that the likelihood of a sexual assault is higher when the victim is female. During the trial, John Lord testified that he found no indication of a sexual assault based on his search for fluids. John Lort stated in court that his investigation did not reveal any signs of a sexual assault on or around Autumn's body. He also did not find any evidence of a struggle. According to John Lort, a typical struggle usually leaves behind signs such as forced entry, tampered locks, or blood spatter, but none of these indicators were found at the crime scene. In contrast, the prosecutor offered a different perspective. Referencing a past instance where Michelle hid a substance in her genital area, the prosecutor suggested that the defendant knew about this and searched Autumn's body in the same area. He claimed that even though Jitesh used his hand, the act was still a form of assault. The prosecutor expressed strong disapproval of Jitesh's actions. During questioning by the prosecutor, Jitesh was asked why he did not immediately call 911 when Autumn stopped breathing. Jitesh responded, he disagreed, although the context of this response is unclear. Jitesh expressed his fear that the police would not believe him if he reported what happened. During his testimony, Jitesh admitted that he had limited recollection of the incident that transpired in Autumn's room. However, he specifically remembered performing CPR on Autumn after she stopped screaming, which involved administering 15 chest compressions and 3 rescue breaths. The prosecutor questioned Jitesh's claim that the strangulation of Autumn was accidental. The prosecutor argued that if the defendant's intention was simply to silence Autumn, he could have achieved this by covering her mouth, rather than also closing her nose. This deliberate action, the prosecutor suggested, indicates that the defendant understood the consequences of his actions. Autumn's son, Gavin, also provided testimony during the trial. Gavin's testimony was given in a separate room from the main courtroom, accompanied by a support worker. Gavin said someone came into his room and spoke to him, but he doesn't remember what they said. The person stood close to him, but they didn't touch him. After they left, Gavin heard his mother screaming in the distance. This part of the experience felt like a dream, but eventually it stopped and he fell asleep again. And he woke up in the morning. The next morning, Gavin went to his mother's room and found it in disarray. Everything was knocked over, broken, or destroyed. At first, he thought his mother was just sleeping, but then Gavin noticed blood on her nose and realized that she was actually dead. He was in shock and couldn't process what he was seeing. Despite feeling overwhelmed, Gavin tried to cope with the situation by carrying on with his day as usual. Gavin recalls spending part of that day playing games and watching YouTube videos. It wasn't until later in the day, June 10, 2018, that he finally mustered the courage to send a message to his father using his mother's phone. He couldn't keep what had happened to myself any longer and needed to tell someone. Chris Sherwin, Autumn Taggart's ex-husband and the father of Gavin, testified about his last contact with her. He received a text message from her around 12:30 a.m. on June 10th. When he sent another text message the next morning, there was no response. This is when he began to worry. Later, he received a text message from Autumn's phone, which turned out to be from their son. A copy of these text messages was presented in court for the jury to examine. On December 1, 2021, a 12-member jury found Jitesh Bogle of first-degree murder, but they did not find sufficient evidence that he had intercourse with Autumn. On January 5, 2022, the court sentenced Jitesh Bogle to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Jitesh appeared in jail via video, dressed in an orange jumpsuit and wearing a black mask. He sat with his back against a wall, away from the camera. When the judge asked if he wanted to say anything, he expressed his feelings of sorrow and remorse. Jitesh said he find it difficult to put into words the sorrow and remorse he feel. The case of Jaden Parkinson. Jaden Parkinson, born on September 26, 1996 in Folkestone, United Kingdom, Jaden is the youngest of 3 children. Her parents had a strained relationship. Family problems led to her parents' divorce when Jaden was only 7 years old. Jaden lives with her father. Although Jaden lives with her father, The relationship with her mother Samantha Shuri remains strong. Jaden and her mother talk on the phone every night. As Jaden entered her teenage years, her life became increasingly unstable. Her father often ignored her. She began smoking and drinking, and spent time living with both parents. At the age of 13, Jaden ran away from her father's house and moved in with her mother, eventually winning a court order allowing her to stay there. Jaden was in a relationship with Ben Blakely, whom she met at the age of 14. Blakely had a profound influence on her, gradually changing her over time. Jaden was 15 when she started dating Ben, 20. The significant age gap worried Jaden's mother, but she couldn't stop her daughter from falling in love. Initially, their relationship was loving and romantic, but it gradually deteriorated over time. And their relationship became increasingly strained. Ben controlled every aspect of Jaden's life. She stopped wearing makeup and became increasingly withdrawn. He dictated what clothes she wore and isolated her from family and friends. As a result, Jaden moved out of her mother's house and into a shelter for women who were victims of domestic violence. Although the shelter's rules forbade Ben from visiting, he continued to exert complete control over Jaden's life. Jaden and Ben frequently had arguments, and at one point, Jaden even warned the hostel staff about Ben's aggressive behavior towards her. Ben exerted significant control over Jaden, dictating her every move and restricting her freedom. He took away her mobile phone, convincing her that she didn't need anything else as long as she had him. Ben also prohibited her from interacting with men and monitored her social media activity. As a result, Jaden stopped attending school. Jaden's communication with her mother, which was once a daily occurrence, dwindled to just 1 or 2 conversations per month. Her mother, Samantha, urged Jaden to return home and end the relationship with Ben, but Jaden refused. Ben's control over Jaden was both psychological and physical, and where Jaden was seen with visible bruises on her face. On November 30th, 2013, Jaden announced to her mother that she was pregnant. Hoping to change Ben, she believed that the baby would bring positive changes to their relationship and his lifestyle. Jaden envisioned the baby would bring them closer together, and that Ben would return to the caring person she first met. Unfortunately, Ben has not changed. Once Ben gained complete control over Jaden, his true nature emerged. He isolated her from friends and family, leaving her financially dependent on him. The situation escalated to the point where Jaden was confined to her room, even restricted from using the bathroom without permission. Unbeknownst to Jaden, Ben was secretly dating other women, exerting the same manipulative control over them. Samantha learned about her daughter Jaden's pregnancy and asked her to come home, but Jaden declined, not wanting to cause her mother more trouble. When Jaden told her Ben about the pregnancy, he became enraged and denied being the father. He even threatened to post intimate photos and videos of Jaden on social media. Fearing Ben would follow through on his threat, Jaden reported him to the police a few days before she went missing. Ben had around 30 explicit photos and 13 videos of Jaden, which she desperately wanted to keep private. On December 3rd, Jaden failed to return to her hostel for the night. Knowing about the problems in Jaden's life, the police tried to find her, but were unsuccessful. They contacted Jaden's mother Samantha by phone, but she did not know where Jaden was. On December 4th, 2013, police received a report that Jaden was missing. Police contacted Jaden's boyfriend, Ben, to see if he had any information about her disappearance. However, Ben was uncooperative and hung up several times, claiming that he did not know where Jaden was, Jaden having run away from home several times before, so her initial disappearance didn't raise immediate concerns. The next day, Ben was arrested and taken to the police station, but not in connection with Jaden's disappearance. The arrest was due to a report that Jaden had filed a few days earlier, stating that she feared Ben would post private photos of her online. The police questioned Ben. Ben denied any intention to post the photos and was released on bail the same day. Samantha distributed flyers with Jaden's picture. In addition to distributing flyers, she also used social media platforms to publicize Jaden's disappearance, hoping to get clues for the case. The police analyzed security footage. They collected surveillance camera footage from the motel where Jaden lived. The footage showed the girl going out to meet Ben but, then, did not return to her residence. On December 3rd, Jaden was seen again at Oxford railway station. Surveillance footage captured her walking inside with Ben, and nothing unusual occurred in the video. After tracking their movements, police discovered that Ben and Jaden had taken the train to Didcot, a town about 10 miles from Oxford. Jaden's last known location was the railway station in Didcot, where the footage showed her and Ben leaving the building. In the past, whenever Jaden ran away, she would usually contact her family within a day or two to let them know she was safe. This time, however, was different. Jaden had not contacted her family or friends, and there was no activity on her social media accounts. After reviewing surveillance camera footage showing Jaden boarding the train with Ben, he became the prime suspect in her disappearance. Police were certain that Ben knew where Jaden was and what had happened to her. The footage revealed that Ben returned to the train station alone, and there was no further sighting of Jaden. 1 week later, on December 10, 2013, Ben Blakely was arrested by the police. Police wanted to question Ben to find out what happened to Jaden after they left the train station in Didcot together. At that point, the police had not ruled out the possibility that Jaden might be hiding of her own free will or that Ben might be holding her. During the interrogation, Ben displayed confidence. He claimed to have no knowledge of Jaden's whereabouts. According to Ben, he and Jaden had broken up, and she was now in a relationship with someone else. Ben suggested that the police should focus on speaking with Jaden's new boyfriend, as he believed this person might have more information about her disappearance. Ben appeared indifferent to Jaden's situation, saying that the fact that they had broken up and Ben had a new girlfriend made her situation irrelevant to him. He suggested that the police check Jaden's social media accounts to gather information about her recent activities and interactions. Ben Blakely was arrested on suspicion of kidnapping and murder, despite Jaden still being missing. The police interviewed Jaden's friends to see if she might have gone to a safe location, but they found out that Jaden had distanced herself from her friends after she started dating Ben. As a result, no one knew if she had a place to hide. During the search for Jaden, a taxi driver from Didcot provided vital information to the police. On December 4th, at around 1 a.m., the taxi driver picked up a passenger on a dirt road. The passenger, a young man with a large, heavy suitcase covered in mud, needed help lifting the suitcase into the taxi. The taxi driver became suspicious and wondered if he had accidentally witnessed a crime. The investigation revealed that the person who called the taxi was Ben Blakely's mobile phone. When questioned further, Ben refused to answer any further questions. Analysis of his phone location records showed that Ben had visited a number of locations in Didcot, including a disused rural shed where a taxi had picked him up that night. A team of police officers and sniffer dogs searched the shed as part of the investigation. It was also discovered that Ben and Jaden had visited the shed earlier. Police found a bracelet matching Jaden's near the scene. Trained sniffer dogs indicated the presence of a body inside the shed, but Jaden's body was not found. This led police to suspect a large suitcase was involved when Ben got into the taxi. Police have appealed to the public for assistance, asking anyone who saw a man carrying a large suitcase in rural Didcot to come forward. Meanwhile, officers have conducted interviews at nearby homes to gather more information. Footage from the train station showed that Ben and Jaden were not carrying suitcases, which led police to wonder where Ben got the suitcases. It is also possible that the man described by the taxi driver was not Ben. On December 14th, police discovered that Ben Blakely's grandmother, grandfather, and younger brother Jake lived near the abandoned warehouse. When police visited Ben's grandmother, she later explained that Ben had taken a suitcase from her a few days earlier. He had arrived in a hurry, dumped the contents of the suitcase on the floor, and left without explanation. Ben's grandmother said he returned home 2 days after Jaden went missing and threw his mountain bike into the shed. However, the bike was dirty when he returned. She also reported that 2 shovels were missing, only to reappear later, covered in a thick layer of dirt. The presence of the 2 shovels raised questions about Ben's intentions and the potential involvement of an accomplice. Notably, Ben and his younger brother Jake Blakely, 17, were also acquaintances of Jaden. Witnesses reported seeing Ben and Jake riding mountain bikes together. As the investigation began, police found sufficient cause to suspect Jake of being involved in the crime and subsequently arrested him. The suitcase that Ben had returned to his grandmother's barn was sent to a laboratory for analysis to determine if it contained Jaden's DNA. Based on the available evidence, police developed a theory that Jaden was killed in an abandoned barn, then placed in the suitcase and moved to another location for burial. However, searching for Jaden's body in the vast field surrounding Didcot seemed challenging. To help narrow down the search area, the police used aviation to aid in the investigation and estimate the likely location of Jaden's burial site. Through aerial photography, police identified 10 locations with significant recent changes in soil surface. The police initially examined several sites but found no leads on Jaden's body. Before they could inspect all 10 locations, a new lead emerged when Jake Blakely began cooperating with police. He directed them to check his uncle's grave at a local cemetery in Didcot, near All Saints Church. This cemetery was one of the original 10 locations, although it was considered a low priority due to the common occurrence of soil changes in cemeteries. Police secured the cemetery after receiving information from Jake Blakely, who suggested that Jaden's body might be buried in his uncle's grave. This method of concealment had never been seen by police before. Jake and Ben's uncle reportedly died in 2006. The new developments in the case have attracted widespread media attention, as this is the first case in the country where a victim's body was concealed in an existing grave. A tent was set up in the cemetery to facilitate a forensic examination. Following this setup, Jaden's family received devastating news. Her body had been found in the grave of Ben and Jake Blakely's uncle. The body was found without clothes, and no jewelry was present. Forensic experts discovered evidence that Jaden had been severely beaten before her death. Specifically, her neck showed signs of strangulation, which was confirmed as the cause of death by the pathologist, with asphyxia being the official cause. While in prison awaiting trial, Ben Blakely changed his defense strategy, and he and his attorney drafted a confession letter stating that Ben was indeed responsible for Jaden's death. However, he maintained that the act was not intentional. According to his testimony, a heated argument led him to push Jaden, causing her to fall from a bridge near an abandoned warehouse. Ben tried to revive Jaden but was unsuccessful. He initially buried her in another location. He then moved the body to the cemetery, where it was buried in his uncle's grave. However, the autopsy results contradicted his story. There was no evidence that she had fallen, but instead, her face showed signs of blunt force trauma. The official cause of death was asphyxiation by strangulation, suggesting that Ben's story was not true. Ben Blakely was trying to reduce his guilt in Jaden's death. Jaden's father passed away due to heart problems before the trial started. On June 23, 2014, Ben Blakely was in court, and it became clear that he showed no regret for his actions. His behavior was provocative and aggressive, revealing his indifference to taking the life of Jaden and her unborn child. During the 4-week trial, it was revealed that Ben Blakely from Reading, Berks, had a history of being a violent and controlling partner. 3 of his previous girlfriends testified against him, sharing their experiences of being in abusive relationships with him. They reported that he would confiscate their phones, physical assault them, and even grab them by the throat if they responded back or if he suspected them of cheating. Throughout the trial, Ben received multiple warnings from the judge for using profanity in the dock and on the witness stand, where he repeatedly shouted at the prosecutor, Richard Lean. His outbursts were so intense that Jaden's mother and other family members were forced to leave the courtroom in tears on multiple occasions. The judge, Patrick Eccles, was also pushed to his limits. He ordered Ben Blakely to be taken to the cells to continue the trial without him. Jake Blakely, who was under 18 at the time, said he had no idea what was inside the suitcase and thought he was burying weapons or dead animals. He was persuaded by his brother, Ben, who promised him an Xbox console and $100 in exchange for carrying out the mission. The prosecutor alleged that the crime was premeditated, suggesting that Ben Blakely intentionally took Jaden to a secluded location where he could commit the crime without being seen. It is believed that Blakely's actions were driven by a desire to control Jaden's life, which was disrupted by her pregnancy and her desire to start anew. Ben Blakely, who did not want to become a father. Jaden's mother, Samantha Shrewsbury, has spoken out in support of creating a domestic violence registry. In an interview with Sky News, she expressed her desire to prevent other families from experiencing similar tragedies. She recalled the traumatic experience of identifying her daughter's body and stated that the memory would haunt her forever. In the year leading up to Jaden's death, Samantha believed that Jaden was the target of Ben's abuse. Samantha remembers an incident where Ben came to Samantha's apartment building the day after he verbally and physically abused Jaden. He managed to enter the building and banged on the door, demanding to see Jaden. Samantha refused to let him in, and in response, he spat on Samantha before leaving. That same day, Jaden went outside to smoke, and unfortunately, Ben found her. Samantha did not see or hear from Jaden for the next 2 weeks. During that time, Samantha assumed that Jaden had gone to Ben's house. As a result, it became difficult to contact Jaden because Ben had destroyed her phone or SIM card. Despite his horrific behavior, which included burning, beating, and starving Jaden, Ben remained in denial about his true nature. The jury deliberated for 20 hours before returning their verdict. Ben Blakely was found guilty of willfully murdering Jaden Parkinson. The judge told Ben Blakely that he took 17-year-old Jaden Parkinson to a remote area near Upton, where he strangled her to death. The judge also noted that Ben's behavior towards Jaden was marked by irrational jealousy, physical abuse, and emotional manipulation throughout their relationship. The judge found that Ben Blakely had taken control of Jaden's daily life. To isolate her, he took away her phone and restricted her movements while she was in the boarding house, even to the point of not allowing her to use the toilet, forcing her to urinate in plastic bottles. Despite Ben's abusive behavior, Jaden fought to leave him. Jaden finally found the courage to end their relationship last November. Ben threatened to share intimate photos of the two of them publicly. The court sentenced Ben Blakely, who was sentenced to life in prison for attempted murder. Ben's younger brother, Jake Blakely, was sentenced to 3 years in prison for perverting the course of justice. The case of Amanda Anderson. Amanda Anderson was born on October 10, 1990, in Fridley, Minnesota, to Mark and Stacy Kennedy Anderson. Amanda lived with her family in New Chapel Hill, about 100 miles from Dallas. It's a small city with a population of less than 1,000 people. She grew up to be a bright and ambitious young woman, graduating with honors from the Tyler Gospel Chapel School in 2009. Amanda is an employee of Trinity Mother Francis and a student at Tyler Junior College, majoring in English literature. She was an aspiring writer, a lover of words, music, and life. But on September 15, 2010, Amanda's family had to face frightening events. Amanda's lifeless body was discovered at her family's home in New Chapel Hill. She was found by her 15-year-old brother, Nate Anderson. Nate had just returned home from a jog in the woods. He called 911 and explained the situation to the police. Nate said he went out for a run because he was stressed about homework. When he came back, he found the door to the house open, which was very unusual. He first checked his room, then Amanda's room, and that's when he saw his sister lying on the floor, unresponsive. The police asked Nate to clarify which door was open, and he explained that people usually entered the house through the garage door. Nate was very emotional, and the police tried to calm him down. When asked if he touched anything in the house, Nate replied that he did not. During the 911 call, Nate told the police that he had discovered the body of his sister Amanda. When asked if Amanda had been shot, Nate replied that she had multiple bullet holes in her head. When the police arrived on the scene, Nate told the same story. Further investigation by a criminologist revealed that Amanda had been sitting up in bed when she was shot, then she fell to the floor. Notably, there was no sign of a gun or shell casing at the crime scene, suggesting that the perpetrator may have taken the weapon with him when he left. Or may have used a revolver, which does not fire a shell casing. Amanda's parents were devastated and could not understand what had led to this tragic event. Being deeply religious people, they found it difficult to understand who could be capable of such a heinous act. Their daughter had just graduated from high school and was a kind person who did not want to harm others and had no enemies. Police began canvassing the neighborhood where the crime occurred to gather more information about Amanda and her family. In interviews, a nearby resident said that Amanda Anderson's family was happy and very religious. A neighbor offered a possible explanation for Amanda's death. He said that the area was generally quiet and low crime, but that about 2 weeks before Amanda died, a nearby home had been robbed. It was possible that the perpetrator of that robbery was also involved in Amanda's death. Perhaps the perpetrator saw Nate Anderson out for a run, broke into the home, and then shot Amanda when she discovered them. To explore this theory, police needed to find evidence to determine whether a botched robbery led to Amanda's death. When the police asked the family to check for any missing valuables, Amanda's father, Mark, thoroughly searched the house and confirmed that nothing had been taken. Although there were valuables such as jewelry and a laptop in Amanda's room, nothing was missing. Amanda's father, Mark, thoroughly searched the house and confirmed that nothing had been taken. This surprising discovery made the police question the motive behind the crime. If the intention of the criminals was to steal, why did they shoot Amanda multiple times after seeing her? The lack of stolen items proved that this was not a robbery. The police began to look into other motives. The forensic team searched the entire house, not just Amanda's room, for evidence. They collected fingerprints and hair, hoping to find samples left by someone outside the household. Additional evidence was collected from Nate, the person who first discovered Amanda's body. His clothing was taken to be examined for potential connections to the crime scene. Initially, Nate's clothing did not appear to be important to the police investigation because it did not contain any visible blood. However, as part of standard procedure to rule out family members as potential suspects, police sent Nate's clothing to a lab for further analysis, along with other collected evidence. Meanwhile, the police asked Mark Anderson, Amanda's father, to reveal the location of all the firearms in the house. As it turned out, the Andersons possessed an extensive collection of guns, which was not unusual for a family in Texas. They didn't actively hunt but occasionally practiced shooting. Following Mark's lead, the police discovered weapons and seized more than 10 different types of pistols and rifles, as well as several revolvers. Their informants also did not provide any clues, leaving the police without a clear lead. The police did not have many clues to identify the culprit. On September 17, 2010, the police obtained the autopsy results 2 days after Amanda's death. The report revealed that Amanda had been shot 4 times, all in the head. What's striking is that any one of these shots would have been fatal, yet the perpetrator fired 3 additional times. The bullet wounds' locations on Amanda's head were also peculiar. The shots were fired from a small caliber pistol. 2 wounds were located on the top of her head, one near the right temple, and the last one on her forehead. Except for the shot to the right temple, which was fired at a 90-degree angle, all shots were directed from top to bottom. The nature of these wounds suggests that Amanda's death was more like an execution. The crime scene revealed that .22 caliber bullets were used in the shooting. The lack of gunpowder marks around Amanda's head wounds suggested the shooter was at least a yard away. Based on forensic evidence, police concluded that Amanda knew her killer. 2 key factors led to this conclusion. Amanda was sitting on her bed, working on her laptop, when she was shot, and the shooter was standing beside her. It's likely that if a stranger had entered her room, Amanda would have reacted defensively. However, she took no action, indicating she was familiar with the shooter and didn't perceive them as a threat. The police sought to identify the killer among Amanda's acquaintances by questioning her friends at college. Her best friend revealed that Amanda was cautious and didn't engage with strangers or use unknown substances. Amanda was not involved in any illegal activities. She also had no enemies at college. However, it is possible that someone was secretly following Amanda and planning an attack. In an attempt to find leads, police spoke with college security about any suspicious incidents related to Amanda or other students over the past year. Unfortunately, this did not yield any results. A week after Amanda's death, police have found no leads and have not identified any suspects. Amanda's family grieves, and they are desperate for answers about what happened. In an effort to gather more information, a reward was offered to anyone who could provide helpful leads to the investigation. The goal was to encourage someone with valuable information to come forward. The police station soon received numerous calls with tips, but most of them were unsubstantiated assumptions that only hindered the investigation. Despite the time-consuming process of verifying each lead, none of them yielded the desired outcome. Ultimately, every tip led to a dead end. The police decided to re-question the Amanda family, focusing on Amanda's personal life, as the nature and number of her wounds suggested a personal motive. Amanda's mother was baffled by the crime, describing her daughter as a devout churchgoer and excellent student who was kind to everyone. She revealed that Amanda did not have a boyfriend at the time of her death, but had been dating a friend her age for about a year. However, the relationship had ended, and as far as her mother knew, they had not seen each other since. Police were looking for Amanda's ex-boyfriend to investigate the nature of their relationship and determine whether he had any ulterior motive for harming her. Amanda's ex-boyfriend reported that he and Amanda attended some classes and occasionally went to the movies with friends, but they never dated. They spent time together on a few occasions, however, their interactions were normal. When asked about his last encounter with Amanda, he said that he saw her the day before she died. According to him, she was on her way to pick up Nate from church. This information was not valuable. Therefore, the police decided to review the case from the beginning. The police started with Nate's 911 call. During the conversation, Nate mentioned that he did not go into his sister's room and said that someone had shot Amanda. When asked if Amanda had suffered a gunshot wound, Nate replied that there was more than one wound, specifically mentioning multiple shots to her head. However, when the police arrived at the scene, they did not immediately find evidence of multiple gunshot wounds, despite their experience in such cases. Furthermore, no gun casings or bullet casings were found at the scene. This raised questions about how Nate knew his sister had been shot multiple times. Investigators concluded that it was impossible for anyone standing at the door to know that Amanda had been shot in the head, let alone the exact number of times. The police returned to Amanda's house and inspected the door that Nate said had been propped open when he arrived. Although they found some scratches, the lock showed no signs of damage. This suggested that the scene may have been staged. After the crime lab examined the weapons seized from the home, the officers believed that a .22 caliber handgun may have been used to shoot Amanda. Analyzing all the available information, the officers came to a shocking conclusion. It appeared that Amanda had died at the hands of a family member. The pistol had been hidden in a safe place, and the killer knew where it was. Furthermore, the person who shot Amanda later returned the gun to its original location. Amanda's parents were not home on the night of the murder. Her father was having dinner with a friend, and her mother was at work. Only Amanda and her 15-year-old brother, Nate, were home. Therefore, all the initial evidence pointed to Nate as the prime suspect. However, the police did not understand the motive behind the crime, especially why Nate used their father's gun to harm his sister. To gain a better understanding of the events, the police took a closer look at what happened that evening. According to Mark Anderson, he had called his daughter to remind her to pick up her mother from work. 12 minutes later, Mark received a call from Nate, who was crying and claimed that someone had shot him. What the police found surprising was that Nate had called his father before dialing 911. The police needed concrete evidence before they could file any charges. Their goal was to avoid causing further heartache to Amanda and Nate's parents. The police decided to speak with Mark Anderson without directly accusing their son. However, Nate's parents soon realized that the police suspected their son. In an effort to gather more information, the police asked Mark if Nate had recently used a .22 caliber pistol. Mark revealed that he had given the pistol to Nate a few days before Amanda's death, after which Nate had used it in the backyard for shooting practice. A subsequent search of Amanda's home led the police to the discovery of several .22 caliber shell casings in the backyard. While these casings matched the bullets found in Amanda's body, it was still possible that this was just a coincidence. More evidence was needed to establish a definitive connection. However, 2 weeks after Amanda's death, Nate's clothes, which he had been wearing when he found his sister dead, were sent to a lab for testing with luminol. The chemical reaction showed traces of blood on his clothes. A blood spatter expert concluded that Nate Anderson had either been in the room when the shooting occurred or that he had fired the fatal shots. Tests confirmed that Nate's clothes had his sister's blood on them. This raised many questions, as Nate and Amanda were known to be close and affectionate siblings. Their parents described their relationship as loving, and family photos showed the siblings getting along well. On November 10, 2010, police got a warrant for Nate Anderson. They found him in the church and arrested him for murder. Everyone familiar with the case was shocked. No one could believe that Nate would do such a thing. The trial began on October 24, 2011. It was a long and emotional road for many, especially Amanda's family. Despite the evidence against the young teen, family members vowed to stand by Nate. Nate's grandmother said that Nate knew nothing but church, school, and love, and that Nate would never hurt his sister for any reason in the world. Amanda's parents struggled to accept that their son was responsible for Amanda's death. Nate was tried as an adult. An examiner for Nate said it would be best for him to remain in juvenile court, but the judge disagreed. For the first time, the state revealed some of the evidence police found in Amanda's home after Amanda's death. Prosecutors claimed that Nate's computer showed a history of repeated visits to adult websites and drawings of violent scenes. Additionally, one of the text messages on Amanda's phone said Nate should be shot. Her friend asked, "For what?" She replied, "For putting big staples in Amanda's head and never helping around the house." Nate Anderson eventually pleaded guilty to a first-degree crime in February 2012 as part of a plea deal. Prior to his guilty plea, Nate confessed to a psychologist and then to his parents that he was responsible for Amanda's death. According to a statement released by the parents, Nate told them that he shot Amanda with a handgun found in their home. Mark Anderson, Nate's father, stated that Nate begged for forgiveness, which he granted. Stacy, Nate's mother, expressed the pain she faced. Was a loving mother to both of her children. As a result of the plea agreement, Nate was sentenced to 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 10 years. His attorney believed that entering into a plea agreement was in Nate's best interests, as neither Nate nor his family wanted the case to go to trial. The case of Amanda Plass. Amanda Plass was born on December 11, 1990. She grew up in Chapee, Massachusetts, with her sister Emily and brother Nicholas. Amanda's mother, Michelle Mayes, described her daughter as a hippie and often joked that she was born in the wrong era. In 2011, Amanda worked as a waitress at a Friendly's in Chapee and was dating a 27-year-old carpenter named Seth Green. On August 26, 2011, Seth called 911 to report that he had found Amanda unconscious in the kitchen of her third-floor apartment. During the call, Seth tearfully told the operator that when he arrived, Amanda was lying on the floor, unresponsive, with multiple stab wounds to her body. He did not know how to help and requested the police and an ambulance. When paramedics arrived, they confirmed that Amanda had died from multiple stab wounds, including to her chest, throat, and abdomen. Police cordoned off the home where the crime took place. When they arrived, they found Seth on the porch, crying and unable to calm down. Detectives carefully searched Amanda's apartment. Whoever the perpetrator was, they had escaped but left behind some evidence. The first thing that caught the detectives' attention was the large amount of blood in the kitchen, indicating that the attack had been carried out with a knife. Police also found Nike shoe prints on the floor and handprints on the broken glass window. The motive for this brutal murder remains a mystery. Based on the condition and number of Amanda's injuries, detectives suspect that she may have known her attacker and that the motive was a personal vendetta. Therefore, the first suspect was Amanda's boyfriend, Seth Green. Police took Seth Green in for questioning. It was no surprise that he was the first suspect, given his close relationship with the victim, his blood-stained clothing, and his role in calling 911. The fact that he and Amanda had been dating for less than 2 weeks before her death, and that her family barely knew him, raised suspicions. Seth was 7 years older than Amanda and likely had different views on some issues. But did that lead to an argument that resulted in the brutal crime? This led investigators to suspect that Seth could be the killer, even though he claimed Amanda was dead before he arrived at her apartment. They determined that about 2 hours had passed between Amanda's death and Seth calling 911. That was enough time to cover up evidence and remove the weapon. So the first question detectives had to answer was whether Seth Green had anything to do with Amanda's death. When Seth showed up at the police station, he looked like he had just been through something terrible. He was mourning the death of his girlfriend. Investigators wanted to know if his feelings were genuine or if he was just trying to deflect suspicion from himself. During questioning, Seth said he had been working all day. He had planned to take Amanda to the restaurant where she worked, but couldn't because of his busy schedule. Seth said he didn't know Amanda well because they weren't in a long-term relationship, but he loved her and had no reason to hurt her. Seth worked as a carpenter at a construction site. Investigators began asking him about his tools, implying that he may have used one of them to commit the crime. Seth often used a tool belt at work, which contained a variety of carpentry tools, including a knife. However, he claimed that he always put the tool belt back after work, and that day was no exception. Seth finished the job, changed his clothes and tools, and then went to see Amanda. He understood why he was the most suspected, but he still insisted that he had nothing to do with his girlfriend's death. The police eventually confirmed Seth's alibi. He even passed a lie detector test. When he arrived at the scene, he was wearing construction shoes, which clearly did not match the Nike shoe prints at the scene. In addition, his shoe size was much larger. and the fingerprints on the glasses did not belong to him. With these facts, the police eliminated him as a suspect. Because Amanda tried to resist, she inflicted injuries on the perpetrator. The perpetrator likely suffered scratches on his body in the first weeks after the crime, as a piece of skin belonging to the perpetrator was found under Amanda's fingernails, an important piece of evidence that the police had hoped for. However, when they tested the DNA sample, they found no match in the database. The motive for the crime remains unclear, as many of the items in Amanda's room were still intact. With no signs of forced entry, the police have two theories as to how the criminals entered the house. Amanda may have known them and let them in, or she may have forgotten to lock the door. Investigators interviewed Amanda's co-workers and friends and discovered that the case may have involved a love triangle. Before dating Seth, Amanda had been in a relationship with someone else, and the breakup was not smooth because Amanda initiated it. After a while, she started dating Seth, and Amanda's ex-boyfriend did not seem to be happy with this. Jealousy sometimes leads people to act rashly with serious consequences. Investigators checked the information but found this theory to be unlikely. Amanda's ex-boyfriend provided his DNA and fingerprints, neither of which matched the traces found on her body or at the scene. Furthermore, he had a convincing alibi. Police investigated other leads but failed to find a solution to Amanda's death, leaving the investigation at a standstill. Amanda's family was determined to find justice, so they distributed flyers and held community events in the hope that someone would come forward with vital information. Amanda's mother, Michelle, said her daughter was not perfect, but she did not understand why Amanda died and why no one had reported any useful information to the police. Amanda's family faced another emotional challenge. They discovered that several police officers had taken photos of Amanda's body on their phones and shared them with others, including civilians. According to an internal report, Sergeant Keith Lame, a senior officer who was in charge of monitoring the scene at 73 School Street, where Amanda was stabbed to death on August 26, 2011, was one of the photographers. He sent the photos from his cell phone to another sergeant, who then forwarded them to a patrol officer. One officer shared the photo with civilians, including a coach at a youth soccer game. Records show that Keith used his cell phone to take the photo. Keith then forwarded the photo to Sergeant Jeffrey Godare. Sergeant Jeffrey emailed the photo to Patrolman Chad Levesque. Patrolman Chad shared the photo of Amanda, lying on the kitchen floor, with other soccer coaches. As he did so, Chad said, "This is something I have to deal with at work." The photo was shown to at least 3 coaches at a youth soccer game in Agawam the day after the murder, according to Captain William Jebb, the internal affairs officer who wrote the report. At that time, Patrolman Terry Deck, who was assigned to record all traffic in the apartment for state police, took a photo of Amanda's body and emailed it separately to 6 Chicopee police officers. The investigation found that all 6 officers deleted the emails. None of them were punished for wrongdoing, and their names were not listed on criminal records. The others were punished for incompetence and failure to meet work standards. Terry and Keith, who took the photos, received letters of reprimand. Jeffrey and Chad were docked wages. Nearly 2 years after the murder, there was no sign that the investigation was any closer to finding the culprit. So investigators decided to review all the relevant evidence, hoping to find some missing information. After reviewing the evidence and items in Amanda's bedroom, they discovered a dry erase board with a suspicious message. The message read, "Dennis was here on November 8th. Interestingly, November 8th was only about 2 weeks before Amanda's body was discovered. Investigators began to wonder about the man named Dennis and his role in the case. They began to investigate the relationship between Dennis and Amanda by examining phone records and social media posts. While investigating Amanda's apartment, police discovered that her ex-boyfriend had given them a crucial clue. He said that Amanda's apartment had been broken into several times during her absence. In particular, Amanda told him that she suspected a young Puerto Rican man whose name began with the letter D. However, she did not want to report the incident to the police and wanted to resolve the situation herself by talking to the man. Amanda tried to talk to the man about the break-in, but he would not listen. Amanda then informed him that a neighbor had witnessed him at her apartment. She also begged him to return items that were missing from her home. However, the man became angry and left. The main goal of the investigators was to identify Dennis and determine whether he was involved in Amanda's death. They discovered that a man named Dennis Rosa Roman lived near where Amanda died. A search of Dennis's records revealed that he had been convicted of burglary and breaking and entering. However, no fingerprints were found that matched the ones found at Amanda's home. Police tracked Dennis to Westfield, Massachusetts, and asked him to come to the police station to talk, but he refused. During the brief encounter, Dennis appeared very nervous. Surprisingly, Dennis turned himself into the police station in November 2013 at the age of 22. Police questioned Dennis about his connection to Amanda. Although Dennis admitted to knowing Amanda from Choppy, he said he had not seen her in several years. This made sense since Amanda had been dead for some time. Investigators then asked him if he had ever been to Amanda's apartment. He replied that he had never been there and did not really know her well. He only admitted that he sometimes sold Amanda marijuana and had had a few brief interactions with her. During questioning, Dennis agreed to provide an oral DNA sample and provided his shoe size. The results showed that his shoe size matched the shoes found at the crime scene. Officers also noted that Dennis was wearing a pair of Nike Air Max shoes, the same type as the shoes found at the scene but with a different sole pattern. After providing his DNA, Dennis refused to answer further questions and promised to return to the police station in a few days to continue the conversation. Because there was insufficient evidence to arrest him, officers were forced to release him. This raised concerns that he might be attempting to flee, causing the investigation to stall. Further investigation revealed that Amanda had been in telephone contact with Dennis on July 28, 2011. She made 4 calls and received 5 calls from him. At the same time, Dennis changed his initial statement to police, admitting that he had spoken to Amanda at times. According to Dennis, Amanda told him that people frequently broke into her apartment when she was away, but she did not report it to the police because nothing of value was missing. However, investigators had heard this story many times before and now suspected Dennis was behind the break-ins. They believed he was hiding something, as his statement changed and lacked a clear explanation. When shown a photo of the dry erase board that read, "Dennis was here on November 8, 11, Dennis suddenly remembered writing it, contradicting his previous statement that he had never been in Amanda's apartment. Additionally, DNA testing revealed that his DNA matched DNA found under Amanda's fingernails and that his fingerprints were on a glass pane at the crime scene. This evidence confirmed Dennis's connection to the crime. After realizing that too much evidence was directly against him, Dennis changed his story again. He now claimed to have been present at the crime scene and tried to save Amanda from the attacker, implying that someone else was involved. When asked about the man's identity, Dennis refused, citing fear for his safety and that of his family. Instead, he provided a detailed description of the alleged perpetrator, a tall, 170 to 200-pound white male with light skin, blue eyes, wearing old pants and dirty boots, along with a t-shirt that read, "Why drink and drive when you can smoke and fly?" Detectives did not believe Dennis's testimony, as all the evidence pointed to only one person being present at the crime scene when Amanda was stabbed. They arrested Dennis and charged him with the murder of Amanda Plass. The trial began in 2016, nearly 3 years later. Dennis's lawyers defended their client, arguing that although he was present at the crime scene, he was not responsible for Amanda's death. They accused the police of mishandling the investigation and framing Dennis after they failed to investigate thoroughly. Dennis claimed that on the day of Amanda's death, the drug dealer forced him to come to her apartment because Amanda owed the dealer $500 or $600. He claimed that the dealer started stabbing Amanda with a knife when things got bad. Dennis claimed that he wanted to intervene but was unable to stop the dealer. Dennis also claimed that Amanda had grabbed his hand, which is why his DNA was found under her fingernails. Prosecutors presented a different version of events. According to them, Dennis broke into Amanda's apartment while she was away and left a note with his name on her whiteboard. Amanda discovered this, suspected Dennis was the culprit, and called him to ask him to return her stolen belongings, which led to 9 phone calls between Amanda and Dennis. Prosecutors claimed that on the day of the murder, Dennis returned to Amanda's apartment thinking she was at work. However, Amanda had come home and a fight broke out, leading to Dennis killing her. A 12-person jury found Dennis guilty of causing the death of Amanda Plass in July 2016, after hearing 8 days of testimony and deliberating for 5 hours. The court sentenced Dennis to life in prison without parole. The police department's internal investigation into the scandal surrounding the release of Amanda's photo was delayed for years. However, in 2018, Officer Jeffrey Gaudier was finally fired in connection with the case. Although he appealed the decision, he returned to work in 2020. Due to his misconduct and previous disciplinary actions, a commission demoted him to patrol officer. Amanda's law went into effect in Massachusetts on August 4, 2022. The law makes it a misdemeanor for first responders to illegally take photos of a crime scene, punishable by up to a year in jail or a $2,000 fine. Amanda's family also filed a lawsuit against the city of Choppy, which was eventually settled out of court for $100,000.